Ken wakes up one day and the world already decides what he is. Not a hero, not a savior, but just another nameless man, except that's bullshit. Let me rewind. This guy has been fighting in the dark for years, cleaning up messes no one else wants to touch. Criminal groups, corrupt elites, dirty secrets, no matter what, Ken walks straight into all of it while everyone else looks away. He saves people without asking for thanks, bleeds without asking for praise, and disappears before anyone can notice. Then one accident changes everything. A burning bus caused some chaos and innocent lives were trapped. Ken jumps in without thinking, again and again, even when his body is breaking down. Suddenly, the cameras turn on and the world notices him. But attention is dangerous, because the moment people start calling you a hero, powerful enemies start calling you a problem. I am Yanagimoto Ken, and if saving lives makes me their target, then so be it. Now let's start from the beginning. Yeah. Next to it sits a man dressed fully in black, known as Kronos, who stares at the weak flower with cold focus while speaking in a low and firm voice, thinking that without the key, even if the door is opened, there is still no way to safely take the nectar. Standing close to him is Zeus, who explains that the Seven-Star Society has already started to make their move, and he wonders whether Gaia and Cylone will truly stay silent about it. Kronos slowly stands up, showing no concern at all, and replies in an uncaring way that it does not matter. Dark energy gently rises around him as he turns to face Zeus with empty and sharp eyes, making it clear that whether Gaia and Cylone speak or not has nothing to do with him. Zeus laughs lightly and apologizes, trying to ease the mood. Kronos begins walking away, his long black coat flowing behind him, as he speaks again quietly to himself, saying that sacrifices are always necessary to achieve something truly great. Without stopping, he steps straight onto the blooming flower and crushes it under his foot, muttering with bitterness that Gaia is foolish for endlessly talking about ideals. As his dark aura grows stronger, he declares with complete confidence that he is not a fool like the others, and that he is the man who will one day rule the world. Far away, in a place filled with fire, a room burns out of control. On one wall hangs a family photograph that looks warm and peaceful until blood suddenly splashes across it. Yugo Mizokami stands inside the room, holding a pistol loosely while resting it against the back of his own head, speaking out loud with a tired voice, mostly to himself, saying that he wants to solve things calmly and wondering why people always make things more difficult than they need to be. His voice grows colder as he looks at the injured man on the floor, Yanagimoto, who has been shot in the shoulder and is kneeling in pain beside his shaking wife. Yanagimoto curses at Mizokami through clenched teeth, calling him a bastard, but Mizokami only sighs, disappointed because he believes Yanagimoto should understand the situation better. This man is no ordinary person, as he is an executive of the Seven-Star Society and the leader of the Australia Zero team. With a calm and emotionless expression, Mizokami crouches beside him and tilts his head, making it clear that he is not here to build friendships, but to uncover the truth. He explains that Yanagimoto's daughter has escaped with the nectar recipe and calmly demands to know where she is hiding. Yanagimoto smiles despite the blood soaking his clothes and shows no fear, choosing death over betraying his daughter. Mizokami slowly raises his gun and aims it at Yanagimoto's head, muttering that he wishes the First Division can witness these final moments. Yanagimoto does not scream and instead smiles with pride until the end. The scene then shifts to a battlefield where gunfire echoes, smoke covers the land, and soldiers shout through the chaos. Among them stands a masked warrior known as Yasha. A fellow soldier runs to him in panic, shouting that the enemy also has an ability user. As others provide heavy fire to hold the enemy back, Yasha moves forward alone, slipping through the smoke like a shadow and cutting past bushes until a bullet suddenly flies toward him. He senses it instantly and turns his blade with perfect timing, avoiding the shot. When the enemy sees his mask and realizes who he is, fear spreads through their ranks, because they know the name Yasha and understand they cannot face him alone. Yasha rushes forward, fast, precise, and deadly. As he moves at full speed, a sudden wave of dizziness hits him, making his thoughts spin as brief memories flash in his mind, memories that feel familiar, yet strange, giving him the sense that something like this has happened before. The enemy soldiers panic and shout for someone to stop him, but Yasha has already reached them. One soldier tries to lift his weapon, yet Yasha strikes first, landing a powerful punch that crushes him. In the very next moment, his blade swings down and cuts the man's head off cleanly. Someone shouts that Yasha has to be killed quickly, but it is far too late. In one smooth and deadly movement, Yasha cuts down everyone standing in his way, their blood spreading across the ground beneath his feet. He keeps moving forward until he finally stands face to face with the enemy ability user, carefully examining him with sharp eyes and feeling relieved that the man is not an awakener. The enemy attacks at once, and the two men clash fiercely, their blades crashing together with a loud metallic sound before flying away in opposite directions. Inside his mind, Yasha curses, bitterly, frustrated because he is in the middle of shedding and his condition is getting worse, knowing he has no time left and needs to end the fight immediately. He gathers his remaining energy and charges forward again, but his opponent skillfully dodges and blocks each attack. Suddenly, using telekinetic force, the enemy pulls his blade back into his hand and mocks Yasha, saying that someone with his name is expected to be stronger, though the fight still feels disappointing. Yasha calmly shifts his stance, his movements smooth and precise, and in one perfect moment, using full control and deadly strength, he delivers his final strike, ending the battle completely. Later, while aboard an airplane, Yasha falls into an uneasy sleep as darkness surrounds him. Within that darkness, he sees two vague and ghost-like women standing before him, one wondering whether the boy can truly become the key, while the other confidently believes that fate will guide him. Yasha suddenly wakes up, running a hand through his hair as confusion fills his mind, realizing that since returning to Japan, he often feels dizzy and sensing that what he sees is not just a dream, but something closer to a memory. The meaning of the word key leaves him uneasy. After some time, he arrives at a place tied deeply to his childhood, a quiet and hidden spot he once visited with his father. The dark and cold room has been unused for years, dust covering everything, with a single chair facing several inactive computers. Entering carefully, Yasha pulls a phone from an old bag, feeling that the entire journey there is strangely silent and heavy. When he turns on the phone, it buzzes non-stop with missed messages, causing his heart to sink as his shaking hands read desperate messages from his family begging him to respond. One message stops him completely. It explains that Chiho Yanagamoto and Eriko Yanagamoto have passed away, and that the bodies cannot be released. His uncle and aunt are confirmed dead, and his cousin Mei is missing. His legs weaken. His mind goes blank. Silent tears fall. He pours liquor into a glass and stares at it emptily as the pain crashes down on him, until the silence breaks into screams and cries. He howls in grief, digs his fingers into the floor until they bleed, smashes his head into the ground in rage, and swears that he will find those responsible and take his revenge. The scene moves to a large and busy city filled with noise, movement, and people rushing in every direction as a young woman hurries through the early morning crowd, clearly stressed as she tries to reach her workplace on time. Her thoughts are filled with irritation, and she quietly complains to herself that on bad days, nothing ever seems to work out no matter how hard a person tries, and that the moment the day starts, her weekend plans already begin to fall apart. She steps out of her home while tightly holding her ID card in her hand, which shows her name as Aoi Miyahara, a reporter employed by CH2, the #1 news channel in the world. As she walks quickly down the street, her mind stays busy, thinking about why her channel is in such a hurry over a particular article, and she reminds herself that she still needs to book her seat. It is Sunday, the final day of a long weekend, and when she arrives at the Tokyo-bound bus stop, a bus is already prepared to leave, with a notice explaining that all seats are sold out because of the holiday rush. By pure luck, Aoi manages to secure the very last available seat, and as she steps onto the bus and makes her way down the narrow aisle, she glances toward the person sitting next to her. The man beside her is wearing dirty, worn-out clothes and looks unclean, completely passed out in his seat, and it is Yasha. Aoi stares at him with disbelief and growing annoyance, thinking about how unlucky she must be to end up sitting next to someone so strange and careless. She continues observing him closely and notices the strong smell of alcohol surrounding him, his clothes stained with dirt and grime, and the seat beneath him already being dirtied, making it obvious that he has likely been drinking all night. While he sleeps, Yasha lets out a heavy sigh and the sharp smell of alcohol hits her face directly, causing her to cringe in disgust. Frustrated and uncomfortable, Aoi quickly pulls out her earbuds, places them into her ears, and turns on her music, hoping it blocks out both the smell and her irritation. Without warning, a loud explosion-like sound shakes the entire bus, causing her earbuds to fall out as she freezes in shock, unable to understand what just happens. When she looks around, she sees a horrifying sight as the inside of the bus is splattered with blood, with some passengers badly injured and others completely motionless. Panic rushes through her body as her mind struggles to keep up, and she wonders if the bus is involved in a terrible accident. Everything feels unreal and blurry as the bus swerves out of control, heading straight toward the river ahead. Aoi desperately reaches to unfasten her seatbelt as the vehicle suddenly lurches forward, and in the next moment, the bus is airborne. Her body is thrown backward, and she feels completely helpless as fear takes over her thoughts, believing that she is about to die in that moment. Suddenly, a hand grabs her tightly by the seatbelt, stopping her fall, and she realizes it is Yasha, who is holding onto a seat with one hand while gripping her firmly with the other. Her eyes widen in shock as she recognizes the same man who is sitting next to her just moments earlier. Before she can react or say anything, Yasha loses his grip, and Aoi begins to fall again. But in one final desperate action, Yasha smashes through the broken glass and pushes her out of the bus, saving her from being trapped inside as the disaster continues. She hits the ground hard but is alive, coughing badly and shaking as she lies there trying to breathe, while Yasha is still hanging onto the broken door of the bus, which looks like it is barely holding together. Aoi watches him with fear filling her chest, thinking about what he could be doing now, as everything around them keeps getting worse. Suddenly, the bus slams into something with a huge and terrifying crash, and an explosion follows right after, as flames quickly spread and swallow the wreckage. Aoi gasps in shock and fear, believing that after such a powerful explosion, there is no way anyone inside the bus can still be alive. Soon after, the bus crashes into the river and begins floating on the water, half sunk, ripped apart, and still burning as smoke rises into the air. Chaos explodes all around her, as cars on the road smash into each other, creating a horrifying scene filled with destruction, broken metal, and confusion. People are screaming, running everywhere, and completely panicked, while Aoi stands frozen and unable to speak, her hands trembling non-stop. Her thoughts keep returning to the man who saves her, knowing he is still inside the bus along with many other people. Overwhelmed by shock, she drops to her knees and bows her head, unable to believe what is happening. As her mind goes blank, then someone nearby shouts and points toward the bus, saying that there is a survivor over there. Aoi looks up quickly but cannot believe it, thinking that no one can survive after such a massive explosion. Moments later, Yasha appears, crawling out through a shattered window and coming out of the floating bus alive. Tears fill her eyes when she sees that he survives, but her shock deepens when she realizes he is carrying another passenger on his back, someone who is completely unconscious. Aoi knows she has to act immediately and understands that there is no time to contact her company first. She needs to show the world what is happening right now. Taking a deep breath to steady herself, she pulls out her phone and starts a live broadcast. Her voice shakes slightly at the beginning, but it soon becomes steady as she announces that this is an emergency broadcast and that she is Aoi Miyahara reporting live from the scene where a serious bus accident has just taken place. She explains that a bus carrying many passengers has fallen about 30 meters off a cliff on the highway, while her camera continues recording and broadcasting everything live. As she films the burning wreck and the damaged bus floating in the river, she wonders why the rescue teams have still not arrived. She then turns her phone toward the viewers again and explains that there is a hero on that bus, that he saves her life, and that he is now saving the other passengers as well. People standing along the road watch in shock and amazement as Yasha, covered in blood and smoke, carries one injured person after another out of the wreck without stopping. Aoi keeps filming carefully, capturing every moment of the rescue. Eventually, Yasha manages to bring out all the remaining passengers and help each one reach safety, even as the bus continues to float dangerously in the water. Suddenly, a message appears on her phone from her office, with her boss angrily shouting about the unauthorized live broadcast, but Aoi ignores it. She tells herself this is her chance, quickly gathers the basic details, and sends the story to the office along with all the footage she records. Back at the CH2 headquarters, her report pushes the entire newsroom into action, as editors rush to process the video, writers prepare headlines, anchors get ready to go live, and everyone works quickly and with full focus. At the same time, the bus flips over violently, its metal body making loud, groaning sounds as it turns and crashes fully into the river. And little by little, it begins to sink beneath the water, with bubbles rising to the surface like silent cries. On the riverbank, Yasha stands completely still, his eyes fixed on the wreckage as it disappears, and he does not move or speak, only watching quietly. Suddenly, a woman's loud crying breaks the shocked silence of the crowd, her voice filled with panic and pain as she screams that her child is still inside the bus. She pushes through the people around her, trying to rush toward the river, but several bystanders grab her and hold her back. She struggles against them, screaming even louder as she says the bus is sinking, that her child is still trapped inside, and that there is no point in saving her if her child dies. Yasha slowly turns his head, his face calm and unreadable, and his eyes move from the crying woman to the dark water, then lift toward the sky as if he is gathering his strength. Without saying a single word, he suddenly starts running and jumps straight into the river. On the shore, Aoi Miyahara is still live-streaming everything, her hands shaking slightly as she holds her phone steady, and her voice carries the seriousness of what she is seeing as she reports that the man has gone back into the water again to save a child. Under the river's surface, Yasha moves quickly through the dark and dirty water, and a golden light appears in his eyes, lighting up the darkness around him. Energy surrounds his body as he uses his power, and within moments he finds the child trapped inside the sinking bus. The boy is unconscious and curled beneath a row of seats, not moving at all. Yasha acts fast and with perfect control, golden energy wrapping around him as he grabs the child and begins swimming toward the exit. Just as he is close to escaping, an explosion shakes the water, sending a powerful blast through the river and causing a large wave to crash across the surface near the shore. Aoi gasps in fear as she watches, realizing that he has not come back up yet, and her heart races as she fears he might be trapped inside the bus. The mother, still kneeling on the ground, stares at the river in terror, her hands shaking as tears run down her face because she has seen the explosion and feels the truth she does not want to accept. Then suddenly, a hand breaks through the surface of the water, and Yasha appears, gripping a stone at the edge of the riverbank. The child is still in his arms and is breathing. The mother rushes forward and collapses as she pulls her son from Yasha, crying and thanking him over and over while holding her child tightly. Yasha stands beside them, soaked, injured, but smiling gently as the boy's life is safe. Aoi captures everything live, her voice shaking with emotion as she reports that the man has risked his life to save the child and that the child has been safely returned to his family. Soon after, helicopters arrive as the rescue teams finally take control of the scene, and officials later announce that a single hero has emerged from a terrible disaster and that many passengers' lives have been saved. Once the rescue work ends, officials announce that an investigation will begin immediately and that the damage from the tragic event will be carefully examined, and within moments the attention of the entire world turns toward the story. News channels everywhere show non-stop footage from the crash, with headlines repeating the same shocking images again and again, while investigators confirm that the disaster has been caused by a violent conflict between criminal organizations, a deadly situation that has thrown innocent people into danger. As the number of deaths increases, people do not only grieve for those who are lost, but also begin asking new questions, especially about the man who has saved so many lives. In a time when the idea of a real hero has been hidden under media exaggeration, politics, and fear, a man with no name steps forward, saves others without asking for praise, and disappears. And because of that, society's interest shifts completely. The size of the crash no longer matters as much as knowing who that man is. A few days later, inside the tall glass building of CH2 headquarters, Aoi Miyahara stands quietly in front of her boss, the CEO, whose face is cold and serious as he scolds her for acting recklessly by starting a live broadcast on her own, even during an emergency. He walks back and forth across the room, clearly upset, saying that at the crash site she does not even call and only sends messages, demanding to know why she acts that way. Aoi keeps her head lowered and says nothing, until the CEO suddenly stops and admits that everyone at the company has been worried about her safety because she has been involved in such a dangerous incident. Hearing this, Aoi freezes slightly, feeling the tension in the room ease just a little, and the CEO waves his hand and says that as long as she is healthy, it is fine. She smiles softly, surprised by his change in tone, but he adds that she still has to write an apology letter and must never make reckless decisions again, telling her to return to work and be more careful next time. As Aoi leaves the office, one of her team leaders stops her in the hallway and tells her that she is now responsible for writing articles about the mysterious hero, since everyone wants to know his identity. Aoi pauses, her heart stirring as she wonders if Yasha is safe, remembering that the rescue team only says he leaves quietly without giving his name, and she feels regret that she never properly thanks him. A sudden idea forms in her mind that maybe she can find him again by using an interview as a reason to meet him, believing that a hero who acts like that must be a good person. Far away in an unknown and quiet place, Yasha stands still in surroundings that remain hidden, takes out his old worn phone, and makes a call, which is answered by a familiar voice belonging to Hermes, who jokes that he never expects the so-called civilian hero to be the one calling. Yasha calmly tells him to stop using that name, while Hermes laughs and teases him by using his real name, Yanagimoto Ken, a name Yasha has not used for years, but Yasha stays steady and says he does not call for jokes and that he is searching for someone. Back in the city, inside the busy and noisy headquarters of CH2, a large poster showing the mysterious hero Yasha is placed clearly on the wall, and beneath it is a hotline number asking anyone with information about the citizen hero to contact the station. What starts as a serious and well-meaning plan quickly turns into complete disorder, as the phone lines ring non-stop with calls that are mostly useless. Some callers are pranksters who pretend they know the hero, while others go even further by dressing up like him, wearing messy clothes, acting drunk, and claiming to be Yasha, turning the situation into something almost ridiculous. Aoi Miyahara watches the chaos grow and presses her hand to her forehead in frustration, realizing that this is her idea and that it is now clearly spiraling out of control. She quietly blames herself, thinking that she never should have suggested this plan in the first place. Just as she is about to return to her desk and try to ignore the mess, her phone buzzes with a new email. She opens it and suddenly freezes, her eyes widening in shock. Without explaining anything, she stands up quickly and rushes over to her team leader, telling him she is heading out. He stares at her in surprise and asks where she is going in the middle of such chaos, reminding her that she still needs to submit her apology letter, but she is already walking away. Soon after, she is in her car, driving fast through the city while speaking on the phone, clearly identifying herself and confirming the information from the tip she has received. The person on the other end instructs her to go directly to the office at the park cemetery, and without wasting any time, she follows the directions. When she arrives, she meets the man who sends the message, Akiyama Takeru, who speaks very little and simply nods as he confirms that the man in the printed photo she is holding is the same one he has seen before. He explains that he notices the man a few months earlier, dressed exactly like he appears in the footage, looking dirty and worn down, and says he remembers clearly because the man first places offerings at a grave and then stays there the entire day drinking. Aoi listens quietly, taking in every word, and afterward she walks alone to that same gravestone. Standing there silently, she finally understands why Yasha looks the way he does, realizing that he has lost someone important and that this pain is likely why he drinks so much. She then turns to a nearby cemetery staff member and gently asks who the grave belongs to. At the same time, in a crowded town square elsewhere in the city, a large digital screen displays a special news announcement that echoes loudly across the open space. Authorities announce that they are actively searching for the citizen hero involved in the highway accident, stating that eyewitnesses confirm he risks his life to save passengers. His description is shown clearly to the public, and as a powerful sign of gratitude, the government announces a gold medal of honor along with a reward of 1 million yen for any trustworthy information that can help identify the hero. Somewhere in the city, Yasha walks by himself through the streets, having already heard the news broadcasts and seen the posters with his image on them, yet his face stays calm and hard to read. In his mind, he believes that by now the people searching for him should already figure things out, and he also thinks that if his body is strong enough, he will personally destroy the criminal organizations responsible for so much harm. However, he knows he is not fully healed yet, and that his strength has not completely returned, so he understands that he needs to act carefully and think ahead instead of rushing in. Rather than chasing the criminals directly, he has already started a plan meant to draw them out, deciding that he will use himself as bait to force the criminal networks into the open. He reasons that groups like this are always supported by someone powerful behind the scenes, most likely a wealthy financial backer, and he decides that he will make that person reveal himself. Once that happens, Yasha believes he will finally learn the truth about his sister and also about his own past. His thoughts are suddenly interrupted by a desperate scream asking for help, causing his eyes to narrow as he sharply turns toward the sound. He follows the voice and soon sees what is happening. Just down the street, hidden inside a dirty and narrow alley, a group of thugs are gathered together, drinking alcohol, smoking, and laughing loudly. Some of them openly talk about human trafficking, and one man brags about selling a drugged girl the night before. Near a wall covered in graffiti, a young woman lies half unconscious on a filthy couch, her body weak and unmoving, with a dark bruise clearly visible on her cheek. One of the men walks toward her while holding a small bottle of drugs, mocking her by saying that the drugs are expensive and that she should not expect to get them for free. At that moment, a calm and clear voice tells them to stop, and Yasha steps into the alley from behind them. The men turn around, confused and irritated, and demand to know who he is. Yasha does not answer right away, and instead walks closer, carefully looking at each of their faces before finally speaking. He coldly tells them that they are trash, living terrible lives and chained to their own filth, and he mocks them by saying that people like them, who cannot survive without chasing pleasure, are nothing more than weak cowards. One of the men explodes with anger and rushes forward, throwing punch after punch at Yasha's face with wild force. Blow after blow lands, but Yasha does not move or react, standing still and silent as he takes every hit. The other men watch in disbelief, thinking that Yasha is finished, but then everything changes. Yasha suddenly catches the attacker's fist in midair, crushing the bone with his grip and causing the man to scream in pain. The rest of the group panics and rushes toward him, but Yasha moves like a powerful storm, striking them down with fast and controlled movements that send their bodies crashing into walls, crates, and the ground. His strength is overwhelming, and his presence fills the alley as the beaten men gasp and groan in fear. Terrified and broken, they back away while Yasha stands calmly, not even breathing hard. He looks at the last man still conscious and smirks as he calmly explains that they throw the first punch and that everything he does is simply self-defense, making it clear that they understand the situation now. Back in the narrow alley, the tension grows heavy like smoke as several men rush forward together, holding knives, sharp objects, and crude weapons that reflect the weak streetlight. Their faces are filled with anger and confidence, believing that their numbers alone are enough to crush one man. But Yasha shows no fear at all and simply smiles. The first attacker charges at him, swinging his blade wildly, yet Yasha moves like a shadow, fast and exact, spinning aside with ease and slamming the man into the ground with a force that makes bones crack. Another thug attacks from the side, hoping to surprise him, but Yasha smoothly avoids the strike and pushes the man away so hard that he flies backward like a rag doll. Not far away, more gang members hear the noise coming from the alley, and one of them, annoyed, turns to a tall and broad man standing beside him, their most trusted fighter, and orders him to go and deal with the situation. The enforcer senses something is wrong, but still nods and walks toward the alley, thinking the opponent might be strong, yet nothing prepares him for what he sees. Yasha stands calmly in the center, while bodies are scattered across the ground, some groaning, others unconscious or unable to move. The enforcer demands to know who Yasha is, and Yasha replies calmly that he is just a civilian who hears noise and comes to check. The enforcer mocks him, saying he should not be proud just for beating weak men, and suddenly attacks with a heavy punch, but Yasha steps aside easily. In one smooth motion, Yasha kicks him hard in the ribs, grabs his head, and with his eyes glowing red, smashes a powerful punch into the man's face, sending him flying across the alley and crashing into a wall. From a distance, the gang leader stares in disbelief, unable to understand who Yasha really is. Before anyone can react, another thug runs at Yasha with a broken bottle, but Yasha's face turns cold as he strikes the man down with a single brutal blow. Silence fills the alley as Yasha slowly breathes out, his power seeming to bend the air around him. Suddenly, tires screech as a car speeds straight toward him, driven by the blonde man who drugs the girl earlier, his face twisted in panic as he tries to escape. Yasha does not move until the last second, when he steps down with crushing force, stopping the car completely as the metal folds under his foot, and the golden light in his eyes burns brighter, showing his ability activates. He reaches through the broken windshield, grabs the driver by his collar, pulls him out with ease, and throws him onto the ground. The man begs for mercy, shaking in fear, and Yasha coldly replies that he will not kill him. Behind Yasha, the drugged girl begins to wake up, her eyes opening slowly, and Yasha calmly tells her to stay still, because it will be over soon. Turning back to the thug, Yasha calls him by name, Yosuke, causing the man to freeze since he never says his name. Yasha demands his phone, checks it, confirms his identity, and then questions him about his father, who Yosuke admits is a member of the National Parliament. This matches everything Yasha uncovers so far. Yasha asks if his father knows about his crimes, and Yosuke stays silent in shame. Without hesitation, Yasha calls a number from the phone, and when a man answers angrily, Yasha calmly explains that the caller is Yosuke's father, and that his son is caught committing serious crimes, including drugs, assault, and attempted rape. Yasha calmly explains that Yosuke is caught in the act and is now facing a prison sentence of at least 10 years, and after he says this, the call goes silent for a short moment. Then the man on the phone reacts in shock and demands to know if Yasha is the police, but Yasha answers plainly that he is not an officer, only a passerby who is attacked badly by Yosuke and his friends, and therefore needs compensation for what they do. He points the phone toward Yosuke while his eyes glow faintly again, reminding him that Yosuke throws the first punch, and Yosuke nods again and again in panic, apologizing in a broken voice. Yasha continues explaining that there is dashcam footage showing Yosuke trying to run him over while drunk, that the drug dealer is present, and that the victim is also there and willing to testify, meaning the case is solid. Hearing this, Mr. Maida's voice on the other end of the line begins to shake as he suggests that they talk privately and asks how much money Yasha wants to keep the matter quiet. Yasha answers directly and without hesitation that he wants 100 million yen and a clear promise that the victim will never be harmed. Maida reacts angrily, saying this demand is insane, but Yasha slowly brings his thumb close to the live stream button on his phone, calmly suggesting that he can go live at any moment. After that, Yasha lowers the amount to 50 million yen, and Maeda growls in frustration, but stays silent. Yasha adjusts his stance slightly, keeping his thumb ready until Maeda finally gives in, cursing under his breath and agreeing to handle the matter quietly. Maeda adds that someone like Yasha can erase any leaks, and that even if evidence exists, no one will believe it, and then his anger turns toward his son as he blames Yosuke for being nothing but trouble. Maeda promises that the payment will be untraceable, delivered as a mix of securities and bundles of old cash, and Yasha nods in approval. He tells Maeda that the exchange will happen the next morning at 6 o'clock, and that he will send the location. After ending the call, Yasha hands the phone back to Yosuke and then turns to the girl, apologizing for making her wait, and gently explaining that while she wants to go home, leaving things unfinished allows her fear and nightmares to continue, and that to truly be free, the source of that fear has to be removed. At dawn the following morning, Maeda arrives at the agreed location, his face stiff and cold, and hands over the money exactly as promised. Without keeping a single yen, Yasha passes all of it to the girl, who stares at him in shock as tears fill her eyes, unable to believe it is really for her. Yasha softly tells her not to thank him and says he is just a passing thug who should be forgotten, though in her heart, he means far more than that. As Maeda walks away, anger burns beneath his calm appearance because his political future is now at risk, and he cannot accept that. He takes out his phone and calls Yugo Mizukami, the same man who kills Yasha's uncle and aunt, and when Mizukami answers casually, Maeda coldly says he needs someone eliminated by any means necessary and offers 50 million yen in cash. To this offer, Mizukami replies with a quiet smile and tells him to explain everything. Inside a dark and poorly lit room, a man stares at shaky video footage showing Yasha rescuing people, and he looks shocked as he speaks about how unbelievable it is that Yasha seems to be saving all the passengers by himself. Nearby, a frightened girl nervously bites her thumb, her body tense as she insists that the face and movements in the video are clearly Yasha's, saying that even though the footage quality is bad, she is completely certain it is him. Sweat forms on her forehead as she remembers the terrifying aura she felt before, which is still clear in her mind. Across the table, another man slams his fist down hard and argues that Yasha died long ago during a battle, and that there is no way he can still be alive. Sitting around the table are 3 men and 2 women, with one empty chair among them acting as a quiet sign of uncertainty and loss, and all of them question how it is even possible for Yasha to have returned. One of the women tells them firmly that there is no time to panic and reminds everyone that they have gathered to discuss what actions they should take next. Another man adds that informing Kei about the situation is pointless and that they will need to deal with the problem on their own. The girl then turns her attention to Mizukami and asks why he is on the phone at a moment like this. Mizukami, who is standing nearby, ends the call and explains that he has sent someone to Maida's place because Maida's son has become involved with a thug. The girl responds with sarcasm, commenting that she did not realize the 7-Star Society has begun cleaning up messes caused by spoiled children. At that moment, a man with sharp and serious eyes quiets the room and suggests they focus on the main issue, asking what they believe Yasha will do next. One of the men, clearly nervous, admits that he has no idea and says that based on Yasha's personality, it is possible he could attack the 7-Star Society headquarters at any time. The girl adds that Yasha is not simply reckless and that he is likely looking for strong and dangerous allies who can help him stand against them. At the same time, Aoi arrives at Yasha's house and knocks on the door, and when Yasha opens it, he freezes briefly in surprise. Aoi shows clear relief at finally meeting him, and Yasha asks how she has managed to find his place. She explains that she has come before, but that he has always been away. Yasha then asks why she is there, and says that if she has come for an interview, he is not interested. Aoi quickly explains that her visit is not for public or professional reasons, and that she has only come to thank him. She says that although she has asked many questions as a reporter in the past, this time her reason is personal. She then takes Yasha's phone and asks why he helped her but left no way to contact him. And as she opens the phone to save her number, she notices that his contacts are divided into 3 groups, which are people he calls, people who call him, and people he must not answer. Finding this strange, she asks him about the difference between those he calls and those he answers, and Yasha explains calmly that it is about initiative, meaning the people he calls are those he needs to reach first, while the ones he answers are people he cannot afford to ignore. Aoi guesses that those must be important people, and points out that she has been saved under the answer group, and Yasha clarifies that the label simply means they are people whose calls cannot be refused. Aoi reaches out to change the contact category on Yasha's phone, but Yasha calmly tells her it is fine, and explains that ignoring someone who makes the effort to visit in person can lead to serious regret. As he smiles while saying this, Aoi feels her face heat up and quietly thinks about how different he looks when he smiles compared to his usual serious expression. Later, the two of them sit across from each other at a cafe, talking casually while drinking coffee and enjoying a peaceful moment together. Outside the cafe, inside a parked car, one of Mizukami's men watches them and makes a sarcastic comment to himself about the strange world they live in, amused by the sight of a thug calmly talking with a girl at a cafe, as he has been sent by Mizukami to deal with Maeda's problem. After finishing their coffee, Aoi calls a taxi, and as she leaves, she tells Yasha that she will contact him again. Sitting inside the taxi, she feels a wave of satisfaction as she thinks about how she has thanked him, treated him to coffee, and spent time walking and talking with him. Then it suddenly occurs to her that what they have done feels like a date, and feeling embarrassed, she leans forward and hits her head lightly against the taxi window, making the vehicle shake. At the same time, Yasha turns around as a strange feeling runs through him, sensing that something is wrong. He hears footsteps approaching and calmly asks the men coming toward him who they are. One of them shows an identification card and explains that they are not suspicious people, claiming they work for a private investigation agency and have received reports about assaults on students, and he asks Yasha to cooperate. Yasha accepts the card with a dark smile and agrees to go with them. They soon arrive at a dark park lit only by a few dim lamps, where the man begins explaining that students have reported being attacked without warning. Yasha replies coldly that perhaps the students deserve it and accuses the group of using money and followers to pretend to be victims. The man then explains that there is both good news and bad news, saying the good news is that their client has ordered them not to kill the attacker, while other men slowly surround Yasha. The bad news follows as the man points a gun at Yasha and says that his constant talking has become unbearable. Yasha stays calm and asks for permission to speak, then asks whether his capture has been reported to their client. When the man admits it has not, and that he plans to kill Yasha first, Yasha smiles darkly and says this works perfectly for him. His eyes then glow gold as a powerful aura bursts out, and when the leader panics and fires, Yasha dodges easily, appears in front of him, throws him across the park, and quickly defeats the remaining men, leaving them terrified as he stands over them, reloads the gun, announces that he also has good and bad news, and begins counting down. The men stand completely still, frozen in fear and unable to move, as terror fully takes control of their bodies. Yasha grows colder with each passing second and asks why they are not answering him, his sharp voice cutting through the silence and making it clear that trying to stall for time is pointless. One man lies on the ground shaking so badly that he cannot speak, and Yasha, now filled with open hostility, raises the gun to the side of the man's head and asks in a cold and mocking way if his ears are blocked, and that is why he cannot hear. The man's eyes widen in terror as he begs for a moment to wait, but Yasha shows no mercy and fires the gun. A single loud shot echoes, and the bullet grazes the man's ear, causing him to scream in pain while blood runs through his fingers as he clutches his head. Another man nearby begins shaking uncontrollably and shouts in panic that he understands everything now, promising he will never show himself in front of Yasha again and offering to give him all his money, even more than the job is worth. Yasha rejects the offer and tells them clearly that they are misunderstanding the situation, because this has nothing to do with money. He demands the man's phone and asks whether it contains the contact details of the person who hires them. The man hesitates, trying to guess Yasha's goal, and instead offers even more cash, but Yasha repeats that money means nothing and that they still do not understand what is happening. One of the men, close to breaking down, mutters in shock that it sounds like Yasha already knows who their client is. Yasha steps closer and calmly states that the client is the 7-Star Society, which causes the man to panic even more. He cannot understand how Yasha knows this, or why he acts so boldly while knowing it, and he tries to warn Yasha that the 7-Star Society controls politics, media, and massive wealth, and that even the president is only their puppet. He begs Yasha to understand that touching someone like Yugo Mizukami will not lead to justice, but will force him to flee the country just to survive. In desperation, the man finally hands over his phone and even offers to introduce Yasha to a doctor who can change his face. Yasha only sneers and sighs, saying he appreciates the advice but that this is not a negotiation or cooperation, and repeats that the man has only one option, which is to hand over the phone. He raises the gun again and mocks the man by asking if his ears and eyes are also useless, frightening him into complete submission. A short time later, the 3 men are running down the street in terror, barely alive, with their leader muttering in disbelief about who Yasha truly is, and realizing that Yasha now has their client's information, which will mean death for them if the organization finds out. They argue about what to do next, and fear reporting the truth, knowing it will get them executed, until their leader suggests lying and blaming detective agencies, planning to kill anyone who can expose the truth. Elsewhere, Yasha calmly holds the phone, having secured the exact information he needs as the scene shifts to a hospital. Inside the 7th examination room of the hospital, Yasha sits quietly across from a doctor who asks if he suffers from any long-term illnesses and shows surprise at how agile Yasha still seems despite the poor condition of his body. Yasha gives a weak smile and says that he is sick during his high school years, then calmly asks whether his condition is truly that serious. After studying the medical scans, the doctor explains that based on Yasha's physical state, it is not strange to say his body resembles that of a man in his 60s or even 70s. Yasha lets out a small laugh, admitting that people often tell him he looks like an old man, and then asks whether fighting is still possible for him. With a tired sigh, the doctor says it is impossible, explaining that if Yasha punches someone, it will not be the other person's face that breaks, but Yasha's own hand. The doctor then asks what Yasha plans to do next, clearly believing he cannot continue living the way he has been. He explains that Yasha has severe damage in his left lung, likely chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, and that his memory is also declining quickly. Yasha listens without speaking, his thoughts drifting as he reflects on how he has been obsessively collecting even the smallest clues for some time. His hands start to shake as he feels the shedding process begin, a rare and dangerous stage where an ability user's entire cellular structure is replaced before reaching the 3rd stage. Although the hospital is under the influence of the 7-Star Society, Yasha comes here intentionally as part of a trap and only needs them to take the bait. Elsewhere, a man walks through a dark hallway holding an envelope and enters a shadowy room where the 7-Star Society once discusses Yasha's return. This time, only 2 members sit at the table, with 4 empty chairs highlighting the absence of the others. The man comments that it is time for the meeting and questions the absence of the rest. One member explains that Yugo runs into an unexpected problem. Saki's trauma worsens, and Kazuki goes to report to Kei. A nearby girl smirks and remarks that the situation feels like a college group project meeting, while another man angrily says there is too much attention being given to a single thug. The man places the envelope on the table and explains it contains Yasha's health check results from earlier that day. The girl opens the file and reacts in disbelief, saying Yasha is not in critical condition at all. Others argue that Yasha is clearly injured in battle and during the bus accident and suggest this is the perfect time to act, especially since his location is confirmed. They reveal that Yasha applies to return to the university he once attended, and the girl smiles, noting they have strong connections there and that even a fight at a university can easily lead to death. She jokingly suggests Yasha might be an agent from a suspicious organization before laughing it off. A man then firmly states that a dangerous element cannot be ignored and declares he will handle it himself, identifying himself as Koji Ayano of the security committee. Another man calmly suggests that Yasha should be eliminated carefully and that he will manage the consequences, while the girl, Kanzaki Tomoe, confidently says the Seven-Star Society has capable users and proposes that they begin their university plans the very next day. On a dark night under a sky faintly lit by a bright moon, Yasha's phone suddenly begins to ring, and when he picks it up, he hears Hermes on the other end. Hermes speaks in his usual loud and playful way, greeting Yasha with fake affection and teasing him as if it is an honor to be contacted by the so-called hero. Yasha ignores the joking tone completely and goes straight to the reason for the call, asking Hermes for information about his sister May. Hermes pretends to be disappointed by Yasha's cold attitude and says that May's situation will take more time to fix, but he adds that he has discovered something more interesting in the meantime. He explains that a girl named Kuniyama Aki knows something important connected to the case and says that he will send her location by message. Yasha immediately feels uneasy and asks if Hermes has pulled Aki into this situation and whether she is safe. Hermes answers that Aki is still inside the country, but reaching her is more difficult than traveling abroad, because although the place is close, it is extremely hard to find and almost impossible for ordinary people to approach. He hints that Yasha might be an exception. When Yasha demands to know what Hermes truly means, Hermes laughs, and finally reveals that Aki has been captured by the Seven-Star Society. The moment Yasha hears this, his body freezes as if something sharp pierces his chest, and before another second passes, the phone is still in his hand, but Yasha himself has already disappeared into the darkness. On the other side of the call, Hermes laughs quietly and mocks him, saying that Yasha should keep running desperately toward his own death until he has no strength left. Yasha sprints through the city at full speed, his heart beating violently as buildings and streets blur around him while he races to reach Aki. Elsewhere, in a different place, a glass of alcohol sits on a table, ice cubes softly clinking, while Mizukami stands nearby listening to a subordinate report that they have lost Yasha's trail. The man explains that their group has been attacked by another office and forced to retreat. Mizukami then speaks on the phone in a cold voice to someone who appears to be a doctor, complaining that they are short on manpower and suggesting that he might recruit the doctor's personal guards. His tone grows darker as he hints that if the doctor were to die in an unfortunate accident, guards would no longer be necessary. The person on the other end of the line is Mr. Maeda. After the call ends, Mizukami mutters bitterly that he hates people who do not know their place. His thoughts shift to the girl who has escaped, and even thinking of her as stolen goods makes his skin crawl with anger. Remembering Yasha's return, he clenches his teeth and curses the fact that even those he believed were dead have come back to interfere. He grabs the bottle of alcohol and mutters that those people should have stayed silent instead of constantly getting in the way. He then pours the alcohol over the head of a girl sitting quietly nearby and growls that the ones who should have solved the problem are completely useless. Lowering his voice into a cruel whisper, he wonders if cutting out their tongues would be better, reasoning that as long as they still have their eyes and fingers, they would still be able to send messages. At that moment, one of Mizukami's men enters the room and apologizes for the interruption, then calmly informs him that the Seven-Star Society has reached out and wants to discuss something related to Yasha. Mizukami replies that he will attend the meeting soon and orders the man to take the girl to a different location immediately. Outside the building, several of Mizukami's men are getting ready to force the girl into a car, and one of them complains under his breath that she is nothing but trouble, adding that if she had simply acted as a decoy, he would not have treated her so roughly. Suddenly, a voice speaks from behind them, asking what they think they are doing, and the girl instantly recognizes the voice and cries out in relief because Yasha has arrived. One of the men with long hair turns around and demands to know who Yasha is, and at that moment Yasha's eyes begin to glow gold as his power awakens, his voice becoming dangerously cold as he says he is just a passing thug. The long-haired man laughs loudly and warns Yasha to leave if he does not want to die, but before he can react, Yasha strikes him with terrifying strength, sending him flying across the parking area and smashing him unconscious against a wall. The remaining two men freeze in shock, unable to move, until one of them snaps out of it and rushes toward Yasha, throwing multiple attacks, all of which Yasha avoids with ease. Yasha grabs the man by the face and slams him hard into the wall, knocking him out instantly. The last man tries to stab Yasha with a blade, but Yasha smoothly dodges the strike, grabs him by the hair, and smashes his head into the car so violently that blood splatters across the metal. Yasha's anger grows stronger as he presses the man's head harder against the vehicle, lifts it again, and coldly asks if the car is expensive. After that, he drags all three unconscious men and places them beside the car before turning his attention back to the girl. She scolds him for arriving so late, and Yasha gently takes her hand and apologizes, admitting that it is his fault. The girl, Aki, then explains how she escapes to the northern region but is eventually captured by the Seven Star Society, and she tells him everything she knows. Through her words, Yasha finally learns the terrible truth that it is the Seven Star Society who kills his father and mother. Yasha asks Aki to come with him to a safe place, but she refuses and explains that her mother is being held hostage in one of the Seven Star Society's hospitals, and that she cannot leave her behind. Yasha promises her that one day he will save both her and her mother, no matter what it takes. Tears fill Aki's eyes, but she smiles faintly and says that as long as she remains under the control of the society, other organizations will not dare target her. She tells him that more than anything else, she is worried about him. And to her, it feels like only yesterday that Yasha and Mei are innocent children playing together, noting how much he has grown since then. Finally, she asks what he plans to do next, and Yasha replies that for now, he still has many things to investigate and people he needs to meet, and because of that, he intends to return to university and re-enroll there. The scene moves to a dark and quiet room where a man wearing glasses sits on a chair, carefully reading reports about Yasha with deep focus, and he speaks to himself, noting that Yasha is badly injured and clearly far from his best condition. He wonders whether it is wise to let this opportunity pass just because Yasha is weak right now, but after thinking it through, he decides that he should deal with Yasha before the man has any chance to recover his strength. Another man standing nearby suggests that they could take advantage of a legal loophole to make things easier, and this man is revealed to be Kondo Kazuki, the head of the intelligence department. A subordinate then asks what kind of people Kazuki plans to send for the task, and Kazuki replies with a cruel smile that he will dispatch 2 individuals who are already in the second stage. When asked whether those 2 are awakened, Kazuki admits that there is only a small possibility, which causes the subordinate to lean back in his chair, clearly disappointed by the uncertainty of the answer. The scene then shifts to a bright and sunny day, with strong sunlight shining over a university campus full of life. Inside one of the university buildings, Yasha unexpectedly meets an old classmate who has believed for many years that Yasha is dead. Yasha calmly explains that he goes overseas to study, and when his classmate asks where he has been all this time, Yasha simply laughs and avoids giving details. The classmate jokes with slight concern, wondering if Yasha is getting involved in anything dangerous again, which briefly makes Yasha recall the moment he points a gun at someone just to take their phone. They continue talking casually for a while, exchanging small and meaningless conversation, until Yasha points toward a nearby group of people and asks who they are. His friend explains that the group is called Paradise, and that they come from a northern country. Yasha jokingly asks whether they are dressing up as mafia members inside a university, but his friend replies with a serious expression that calling it cosplay is being too kind. He goes on to explain that Japan's international situation has become very complicated because oil is now being replaced by a new energy source called an energy pack, which can push the human body beyond its limits and turn people into awakeners. Since Japan is the main developer of this energy, the country becomes filled with awakeners, and as a result, underground organizations start acting boldly. Although these groups claim they are in Japan for cultural exchange, in reality they operate as spies, and his friend quietly adds that they are basically just mafia groups. He explains further that the university has turned into a battleground between different gangs, including Paradise from the north, Pure Stream from the east, and Hanrang from Japan. These groups create a rule system called a duel, where any problem or complaint has to be solved through fighting. Even though the student self-governing committee is meant to control the situation, it loses all authority and no longer matters. Yasha thinks the entire situation is pointless and a waste of time. Suddenly, a tall man walks up to Yasha and tells him that he is blocking the way, and Yasha responds with a smirk, telling the man to leave. The atmosphere immediately grows tense and heavy, and at that moment, a thin young man appears and mocks the tall man, pointing out that his large body is probably the reason he cannot get through. The tall man narrows his eyes and says that he has never seen the skinny man before, accusing him of looking down on Hanrang and showing disrespect. He clenches his fist tightly and complains that people from Paradise clearly have not been taught to keep quiet, and with that anger, he suddenly rushes forward and throws a punch. The skinny man avoids the attack easily and catches the tall man's arm in midair, and as his eyes turn red, he calmly tells him that adults should not interfere in childish games. Before the situation can worsen, a girl arrives with her group and steps in, asking whether Hanrang plans to disrupt the balance between the groups. The skinny man's face turns pale with fear as he recognizes her as Zhang Qiuxia from Paradise. He then looks toward Yasha and points at him, saying that it seems Yasha does not care about his own safety at all. Yasha begins to wonder if this man somehow knows who he really is. Zhang walks past Yasha, giving him only a short glance, and states coldly that he is nothing more than someone who can only stand by and watch while others are consumed. Her voice grows even colder as she adds that he is basically trash. Yasha and his friends stay silent and simply watch as Zhang and her group walk away. Shortly after, another student hurries over and asks Yasha's friend, who is also his teacher, if he is all right. This student is Tachibana, the president of the student self-governing committee. The teacher tells him not to worry, but Tachibana apologizes for arriving late and admits that the committee becomes an empty group that exists only in name and has no real power anymore. He then turns to Yasha and asks him to look after them and support the committee. Yasha agrees quietly at first, but then suddenly pauses when he realizes with sinking dread that Sawayama, his friend, arranges for him to be part of the committee without asking him first. Yasha's expression darkens as a heavy and dangerous aura begins to leak from him. Sensing this change, Tachibana quickly explains that Sawayama said he will bring in someone incredible as a counselor, which is why this happens. Yasha turns sharply towards Sawayama and accuses him of tricking him, then looks back at Tachibana and asks whether accepting the position even matters. He questions whether the committee is truly any different from the gangs and asks if they will really stay humble once they gain real power. Tachibana stays silent for a short moment before answering firmly that they will change, and he promises it with determination. Yasha begins to walk away, saying that if that is the case, then he has no further business there. Tachibana calls after him again, repeating that they truly will change, and Yasha stops and asks whether Tachibana will honestly stand by his side. Tachibana's face lights up with joy at that question, and he promises that with Yasha's help, they will turn the rotten school into something they can be proud of. Later that night, Yasha, Tachibana, and Sawayama sit together on the grass under a sky full of stars, enjoying a calm and quiet moment. Yasha asks Tachibana if he thinks he has charisma, and Tachibana laughs and gives a nostalgic thumbs up, joking that the most important quality for a president is having a strong tolerance for alcohol. He then grows serious and admits that there is something he wants to ask, wondering if it is true that Yasha is close with Kei-sensei and how they first meet. Yasha raises an eyebrow and repeats the question with amusement, thinking about that terrifying Kei-sensei, as the scene shifts to another place where one man stands tall while another lies collapsed at his feet. The floor of the room is covered with bodies, with people groaning in pain or lying completely unconscious, and blood is splashed across the cold tiles everywhere. Standing calmly in the middle of the destruction is Yasha, showing no emotion as he looks down at the fallen man and questions whether they have always been so proud of bullying those who are weaker than them. He runs a hand through his hair and mutters with clear disgust that being around people like them makes him feel like trash himself. As he turns away, he notices a young boy crawling weakly across the floor, shaking and trembling in fear and pain. Yasha walks toward him and calmly explains that he recognizes what the boy is experiencing, something he himself has gone through before, which he refers to as symptom. He describes it as the moment when both the body and soul feel like they are being torn apart, marking the beginning of a dangerous process known as molting. Yasha slowly reaches out his hand to the boy and says that since he has seen this process with his own eyes, he can no longer ignore it, promising that he will protect the boy until the molting is complete and make sure no one harms him during that time. However, he also makes it clear that once the process ends, the boy will have to survive on his own. Hearing this, the boy's eyes widen, shocked by the pain he feels, but also strangely comforted by Yasha's steady voice. Somewhere else, inside a dim office, a man sits quietly reading Yasha's medical report, and as he goes through the pages, he wonders if the feeling inside him is nostalgia, but quickly corrects himself and realizes it is excitement over something unfamiliar. He notes that Yasha has gone through the same molting process he himself once experienced, so it makes sense that Yasha recovered during that incident. Yet what truly puzzles him is how calm Yasha remains throughout it. A sudden thought crosses his mind, making him wonder if Yasha has already reached the next stage. Looking toward a board covered in files, he speaks aloud that while he does not expect much from the Awakeners of Paradise, Hanrang, or even the Seven Star Society, the situation is starting to become interesting. And this man, known as K, smirks as he decides that he might soon have a new test subject. The scene then shifts to a bright and sunny day at the university running track, where Yasha walks beside Sawayama and casually comments that he is too weak. Sawayama sighs deeply as he opens a water bottle and says he never expects Yasha to actually accept the role of counselor for the student committee, adding that it is ironic for someone like Yasha to call others weak. He suggests that maybe Yasha simply thinks settling down somewhere would not be such a bad idea, and believes that Yasha dislikes seeing his friends being pushed into difficult situations, and regardless of the reason, he says he is happy about Yasha's decision. Yasha replies calmly that he has not accepted the position for the lodging, explaining that he has sensed Tachibana's true feelings, and that he is good at telling when people are lying, admitting that he likes people who do not pretend to be something they are not. Sawayama smirks and comments that such honest people are rare these days. Just then, a girl approaches them, and it is Aoi, the same girl from the earlier bus accident, which visibly surprises Yasha. Aoi asks what he is doing there, and Yasha responds with a playful grin, saying that he does look like a student after all, while Sawayama watches their easy exchange with growing irritation and begins shouting at Yasha, annoyed by how naturally Ioi seems to get along with him. Yasha turns toward Ioi and calmly asks what she is doing on campus. She explains that she has come to the university to interview a student because she has heard rumors that several groups are gaining power inside the school. As they stand together, nearby students begin to look at them, recognizing both Ioi and Yasha. Aoi says that since this university is the best in the country, it naturally attracts outside forces. She adds that she wants to see for herself how serious the situation has become. However, she sighs and admits that no one has agreed to an interview yet. Yasha quietly thinks about how she has managed to stay safe until now. Aoi then tells him she cannot return to the office without results because her team leader will be furious. Yasha offers to help her, which surprises her because she has not been able to interview even one student so far. Yasha points toward Sawayama and explains that even though he does not look like it, Sawayama is actually one of the university's professors and knows a great deal about what is happening. The three of them move to another area of the campus. Aoi and Sawayama sit on a bench while Yasha stands nearby, keeping watch. Sawayama calmly explains how the different factions inside the university are structured. Aoi comments that it sounds like the situation goes far beyond simple cultural exchange. Sawayama confirms that some groups are backed by powerful organizations outside the school. When Aoi asks if there are any groups that are different, Sawayama tells her about a faction called Fluorescent, which is led by a girl. He explains that this group has not caused any trouble and does not appear to be supported by any criminal or underground forces. Although Fluorescent does not have much power or influence, they are strangely well known. Sawayama says that is all the information he has, and warns her not to try interviewing any of the other factions. After some time, Sawayama stands up and says he has work to attend to and needs to leave. Aoi turns to Yasha and says that Sawayama seems like a good person. Still, even after the interview, she feels unsatisfied. Yasha then suggests giving her a tour of the campus, but only if she stays close to him the entire time. Aoi brightens at the idea, and quietly wonders if this can count as a campus date. Elsewhere on campus, a man angrily questions his subordinate about the reporter, demanding to know where she is. He says he has heard someone is snooping around and grows furious, accusing her of trying to support the student committee. Without warning, the man suddenly charges at Aoi with his fist raised. Yasha reacts instantly, stepping in and dodging the attack in one smooth motion. The man's punch slams into a nearby table, shattering it completely. Yasha remains calm and steady. The attacker then demands to know whether Yasha intends to oppose Paradise. Yasha replies casually, asking why he should even bother resisting. The man moves toward Aoi again and demands to know why Yasha has stayed silent until now. Yasha meets his gaze and explains that if resisting means protecting people from having their rights taken away, then he has no intention of taking those rights. The man's face twists in anger as he demands clarification. Yasha steps forward, his voice cold, and formally declares on behalf of the student committee that he is challenging Paradise to a duel. He finishes with a quiet but dangerous smile, telling them to resist as hard as they can. Ken chooses to challenge Paradise completely on his own, while acting as a counselor for the student committee, fully aware that he is risking both his position and his reputation by doing so. At the same time, Iori walks through the city, quietly reading detailed reports about Ken and the people connected to him. The information describes Ken as a close friend of Sawayama, someone linked to Hwarang, and now a newly appointed counselor at the university. It also shows that Ken's academic results are nothing special and even quite poor, yet one detail stands out clearly among all the data. The report states that Ken is known as a very reliable man. While Iori is still thinking about this, one of his subordinates suddenly rushes toward him in a panic and tells him that a duel between Ken and Paradise is about to begin. Hearing this news shocks Iori deeply, and he finds it hard to believe that such a reckless and dangerous challenge has already been made. Back at the battlefield, Ken and his opponent stand facing each other with heavy tension filling the air. The Paradise fighter acts extremely confident and arrogant, mocking Ken as if his defeat is already decided and speaking as though Ken is about to die. Ken, however, remains calm and clearly states that if he wins the duel, Paradise will have to be completely disbanded. At first, the attacker thinks Ken is joking and laughs at the idea, but when he sees Ken's serious expression, he realizes that Ken truly means every word. The Paradise fighter then starts explaining what he will demand if he defeats Ken, but before he can finish speaking, Iori arrives at the scene just in time. Iori quickly tells everyone that Ken has only recently returned to the university and does not yet fully understand the duel rules. This explanation does not help as expected, because the president of Paradise mocks Iori and the 7-Star Committee, saying they are so disorganized that they do not even know their own rules. This insult makes Iori hesitate and seriously consider whether he should remove Ken from his counselor position. He understands that allowing such a duel could damage the image of the committee, and that openly challenging Paradise is an extremely risky move. At that moment, Ken steps closer to Iori, and calmly reminds him that his original goal is to return things to a normal and peaceful state. Ken also points out that no matter how capable Iori is, he cannot achieve that goal alone. Hearing this, Iori reflects on his role as president of the Seven Star Society and admits to himself that Ken is right. After Ken walks away, several committee members gather around Iori and strongly urge him to immediately remove Ken from his counselor role, saying that Ken's actions are too reckless and dangerous. However, Iori has already made his decision. He explains to them that when someone wants to achieve something that seems impossible, they have to place their trust in something extraordinary. Looking at Ken from a distance, Iori admits that Ken is rough, unpredictable, and far from polite, but he also believes that such a person might be exactly what they need. In the end, Iori decides to trust Ken just this once and see whether he truly has the strength to support his bold actions. Ken then turns back toward the Paradise Fighter and politely apologizes for being distracted earlier. He calmly returns to discussing the duel conditions and casually asks what the man wants if he wins, even lightly suggesting food as a joke. To Ken's surprise, the Paradise Fighter replies that he wants the same thing Ken demands, which is the complete disbanding of the Seven Star Society, making the duel even more serious and dangerous for everyone involved. As soon as he says this, the fighter straightens his posture and prepares himself seriously, while Paradise's president shouts encouragement from the side, telling him to beat Ken without holding back. With the conditions now clearly set, the duel officially begins. The Paradise Fighter rushes forward aggressively, confident in his strength, but Ken avoids the attack with ease, moving smoothly out of the way. While attacking, the man shouts that Ken himself will become the reason for the collapse of the Seven Star Society. As the fight continues, Ken quietly observes the reactions around him and realizes something important. The Seven Star Society itself is not opposing Paradise in this duel. He understands this because Paradise has not demanded anything personal from him. Because of this, Ken suspects that Hwarang might be involved behind the scenes. But even if that is true, it does not bother him. No one is interfering with the duel, and that is all that matters to him. Meanwhile, the watching crowd begins to whisper among themselves. Many think Ken is weak, inexperienced, or afraid, since he is only dodging attacks instead of fighting back. One person points out that Ken has not thrown a single counterattack. As time passes, the Paradise Fighter grows more and more irritated. Every swing misses, and Ken avoids him again and again without effort. Finally, unable to hide his frustration, the fighter shouts that Ken should stop moving around and face him properly, complaining that the constant dodging is irritating. Ken listens carefully and then does exactly what is asked. He stops dodging. Instead of stepping away, Ken suddenly moves forward and strikes the man with a single punch so powerful that a deep, booming sound echoes across the entire area. As he lands the blow, Ken calmly states that he still has some trash left to clean up. The Paradise Fighter is sent flying far across the ground. Ken then notices a stick lying nearby and casually picks it up, asking if he can borrow it. When he stands upright again, the crowd stares in disbelief. Many cannot accept that someone this strong is standing alone against Paradise, and some convince themselves it must be luck. Ken ignores the noise and uses the stick to draw a large circle on the ground. While he is doing this, the Paradise Fighter tries to sneak up behind him and grab him. There is no real reason for the attempt, since Ken has never looked close to losing even once. Just as expected, Ken lowers his body slightly, causing the man to stumble forward, and then slams him down onto the ground, pinning him firmly. Ken then remembers how Paradise's president orders the man to beat him badly. Deciding to return the favor, Ken begins striking the pinned fighter repeatedly. Blood flows heavily, and the sound of each hit shocks everyone watching. Even Iori stands frozen, unable to believe what he is seeing. After delivering a brutal beating, Ken finally stands up and calmly begins counting the members of Paradise who are present. When he finishes counting, he turns toward Iori and casually asks whether the rules allow him to duel against multiple people at the same time, since he does not feel like counting anymore. When Iori confirms that it is allowed, several members of Paradise immediately rush forward together, charging straight at Ken without hesitation. Ken says that he is too tired to keep counting anymore and tells everyone from Paradise who is still standing there to come and fight him all at once. The men behave exactly as he expects and do not stop to think, plan, or hesitate even for a second. Without any coordination or strategy, they all rush toward Ken together in a reckless wave, believing that numbers alone are enough. As soon as they come close, Ken calmly begins to show them what real fighting actually looks like. His movements are simple, clean, and controlled, and every step he takes makes it clear that there is a huge gap between him and them. One of the men shouts a harsh insult and tells Ken to go to hell. Ken takes those words seriously, and his expression hardens as his attacks immediately become stronger and more severe. He explains in a calm but firm way that speaking like that to a senior is rude, disrespectful, and shows a complete lack of manners. He makes it clear that such behavior is unacceptable. Even after hearing this, the group fails to understand the situation they are in. Instead of backing away, they continue to surround Ken from all sides, desperately searching for a weak point where they can grab him or pin him down. Every attempt they make fails one after another, and none of their actions bring them any closer to victory. No matter how hard they try, Ken remains untouched. Eventually, 3 of the men manage to find a very small opening and jump onto Ken together, using all their strength and weight to hold him down. While restraining him, they shout loudly for another man to charge forward and end the fight once and for all. As that man runs toward Ken, his eyes begin to glow, showing that his instincts and power have fully awakened. At the same time, the 3 men holding Ken shout warnings to the others, telling them not to hesitate because this might be their only chance. Ken, however, remains completely calm and even sounds slightly playful. He says that it seems he will have to personally teach them basic courtesy since they clearly are not learning anything on their own. In a single smooth motion, he breaks free from their grip as if their hands mean nothing, shaking them off with ease. He then picks up his stick and begins swinging it around his body, striking anyone who dares to come close to him. Each swing is precise and overwhelming, sending attackers flying away before they can react. Ken reminds them that he is generously spending his valuable time dealing with them, yet they show no respect at all. He points out how they have been cursing at him repeatedly and telling him to die, which proves that they do not even know how to speak properly. He also notes that some of them are openly wishing death upon him, showing how little awareness they have of the situation and how foolish they are acting. During the chaos, one man attempts to attack Ken from above, thinking he has found the perfect opening. Ken catches the man in midair without any effort and strikes him down so brutally that the man is completely removed from the fight. The impact leaves no doubt that the man cannot continue. Ken then warns the remaining attackers that if they are truly incapable of killing him, then the very least they can do is learn how to speak with respect. Even after hearing this warning, the men still fail to understand the danger they are facing. Seeing their refusal to learn, Ken decides that it has become his responsibility to teach them not only proper manners, but also awareness of reality. He continues to overwhelm them with effortless strength, crushing their confidence and resistance until none of them can stand properly anymore. In the end, Ken openly declares that all of them are nothing more than worthless people who refuse to learn, even when faced with complete and absolute defeat. As Iori watches Ken fight wildly and without any restraint, he finally understands that Ken has truly meant everything he has said earlier and that he is never a man who speaks empty words. Iori suddenly remembers a quiet night when he is drinking with Ken, a moment when the two of them are calm and relaxed. During that time, Ken casually tells him that Iori is actually a fairly decent human being if he can be reused properly. A strange comment that stays in Iori's mind. Not long after that, Sawayama arrives and seems genuinely pleased to hear that Ken has acknowledged Iori in such an unusual way. Sawayama then explains to Iori that this is simply Ken's odd way of showing respect towards someone he finds acceptable. Sitting next to Iori, Sawayama asks him if he knows the meaning of the term dirty beggar, and when Iori admits that he does not, Sawayama calmly explains that it describes people who wander endlessly through life and are never able to settle down anywhere. He says that even if such people are given something valuable, it will not hold much meaning for them, yet they will still be able to tell what is useful and what is not. According to Sawayama, Ken's past is exactly like that, because whenever Ken appears to be alone, he is actually surrounded by enemies who wish him harm. Throughout his life, Ken has faced countless killing intentions, deep fear, and horrifying situations that most people would never want to experience. Instead of breaking under that pressure, Ken silently gathers those experiences, separating them and storing them away to turn them into strength later on. Sawayama explains that when Ken uses his power, the people close to him, especially those he judges to be weak or incompetent, are treated like trash and thrown aside without hesitation. That is simply the kind of man Ken has become. Looking up at the sky back then, Sawayama says that Ken is someone who clearly divides people by their worth, and it slowly becomes clear that the story of the dirty beggar has always been describing Ken himself. Returning to the present, Ken has already defeated every single member of Paradise on his own and is now holding their main fighter by the collar, lifting him up off the ground as if he weighs nothing at all. Ken tries to count how many people he has beaten so far, but the man he is holding is too badly injured to speak or respond in any way. Understanding this, Ken calmly remarks that the man is probably unable to answer because his ears are clogged with blood. Nearby, the president of Paradise stands frozen in complete shock, unable to accept what she is seeing unfold in front of her. Overwhelmed and desperate, she blames Iori for carefully selecting Ken as a new member, insisting that none of this would have happened otherwise. Iori, however, remains calm and replies that Ken has been a student at the university long before this conflict ever begins. As the situation grows more hopeless and the fear of Paradise being completely destroyed weighs heavily on her, a man named Wei Zilong steps forward and approaches the president. With no other choices left and her authority slipping away, she finally gives in and orders Zilong to draw his sword and act, hoping this last move might change their fate. Zilong calmly tells the president that he will take full responsibility and do exactly what she asks, making it clear that he is ready to face whatever comes next. At the same time, Ken acts very calmly, using a wooden stick to slowly carve the number 182 into the ground, which shows how many people he has already defeated during the fight. All around him, injured and unconscious men are scattered across the ground, lying still as if they are broken toys that have been thrown away. When Ken notices Zilong stepping forward, he speaks casually and says that Zilong has arrived a little too late, explaining that he has just finished writing the number and will now have to change it again. Zilong answers with a confident smile, acknowledging Ken as a senior and saying that it would have been rude to stand before him without being fully prepared. The mention of preparation catches Ken's attention for a moment, but before he can think about it further, Zilong suddenly rushes forward with full force, clearly showing that he has no intention of backing down or hesitating. Ken immediately shows his incredible defensive skill by stopping Zilong's sword using only the wooden stick in his hand. He casually asks whether that is really all Zilong can do, and the strength of that single block alone sends Zilong flying backwards several steps. After regaining his balance, Zilong comments that Ken's presence feels no different from that of an ordinary person. Yet his fighting ability is far beyond normal, and he cannot understand how Ken is able to fight this way. Ken simply scratches his ear and replies in a relaxed manner that it only means he is better, then surprises everyone by dropping the stick and saying that he will continue fighting without it. Zilong believes that Ken fighting without a weapon will not make much difference, but this thought quickly proves to be foolish. Ken has already defeated a huge number of people at the same time, yet they still fail to understand how wide the gap between them really is. Zilong charges again with renewed strength, swinging his sword again and again, but Ken avoids every attack with smooth and precise movements. No matter how hard Zilong tries, he cannot land a single hit, as Ken's timing, balance, and footwork are far superior. Ken's movements are so fast and controlled that Zilong cannot even properly follow him with his eyes. In the end, Ken strikes back with one powerful punch that sends Zilong flying far away. Zilong crashes to the ground but stays conscious, gripping the earth as he tries to understand what has just happened. Instead of anger, he begins to feel a sense of respect as he realizes how skillfully Ken is using his overwhelming power. Ken then calmly asks whether Zilong truly thinks he has been given enough time to rest. Zilong admits that he has completely underestimated the Students' Committee and accepts that his earlier judgment has been wrong. Realizing there is no other choice, he decides it is finally time to stop holding back and fight seriously, even though he understands that the battle will be extremely difficult. Zilong quickly takes a strong fighting stance and his eyes start glowing red as a dangerous energy spreads around his body. He is fully focused, and even his smallest movements cause cracks to form in the ground beneath his feet. In his mind, Zilong believes that he has reached a level where no one can match his speed anymore. He lifts his sword high and prepares to strike, fully confident that Ken will not be able to see the attack coming. Zilong believes with complete confidence that this final attack will decide everything, and that Ken will suffer regret even after dying from it. As he lifts his sword and prepares to strike with all his strength, he feels sure that Ken will never see the blow coming. However, at the very moment Zilong swings, Ken only notices him from the corner of his eye, as if the attack is not important enough to deserve his full attention. At the same time, the focus shifts to the crowd watching the duel. Everyone is staring directly at the fight, but no one can understand what has just happened. The movement is far too fast for ordinary human eyes to follow, and for a short moment, no one can tell who has gained the upper hand. When the dust and smoke finally settle, an unbelievable sight appears before them. Ken is standing calmly, holding Zilong's sword using only the tips of his fingers, as if stopping it has taken no effort at all. Zilong freezes in complete shock, unable to process what he is seeing. Ken has not blocked the blade or knocked it away. He has simply caught it in midair. In that instant, Zilong finally accepts the truth that he is no match for Ken. He understands that this battle is not about speed alone. What truly makes Ken terrifying is the fact that he adjusts his own speed to perfectly match his opponent. It feels as though Ken is merely playing with him, treating the fight like a game, and Zilong is no exception. Ken shows a small, relaxed smile and casually asks whether that attack has really been Zilong's full power. Zilong tries desperately to pull his sword back, but it does not move at all. No matter how much strength he uses, the blade feels impossibly heavy in Ken's grip. He cannot understand what is happening or why his weapon refuses to budge. Watching Zilong struggle, Ken thinks that his opponent still wants to continue playing. He briefly apologizes for being slow to notice, and then releases the sword. However, before Zilong can even react, Ken moves so quickly that he appears behind him without making a sound. Zilong senses danger and tries to strike back, but Ken changes his position with ease. Zilong tries again, but once more, he fails to touch him. On the third attempt, Ken finally acts. He grabs Zilong's arm, lifts him by the throat, and raises him off the ground. At that moment, Zilong clearly understands that if this continues, his life will end very quickly. While holding him, Ken's attention shifts to the sword. He thinks it looks somewhat interesting, so he takes it from Zilong's hand and calmly walks over to the place where he has written the number of defeated enemies earlier. As Ken prepares to add another number to the ground, the sword suddenly shatters into pieces. Ken frowns in annoyance, realizing that the weapon is nothing more than a cheap imitation rather than a real sword. The blade does not break because of poor handling, but simply because Ken is far too strong for such a weak weapon. He expects that someone like Zilong would carry a much better sword, especially if he represents paradise. This realization leads Ken to quickly understand that Zilong is not truly the leader of the group. Ken then turns his gaze toward the female president of paradise, who stands completely frozen, unable to believe what she has just witnessed. Her face shows disbelief and fear as she struggles to accept the outcome. With a look of mild disappointment, Ken scoffs lightly and calmly asks whether she still has more people willing to fight him, or if it is finally time to follow through with the deal that has already been agreed upon. When the battle finally ends, the people who have been watching begin to whisper softly among themselves, unsure of what they have just witnessed, and many of them start wondering if this truly means that the Paradise Committee has finally come to an end. In the middle of the confusion, someone suddenly speaks out and reminds the crowd that Paradise still has one of its strongest fighters left, a man known as Wei Zilong, which causes a brief spark of hope to spread through the onlookers. However, that hope vanishes almost instantly when everyone realizes that the man who has just been beaten so badly with nothing but bare hands is actually Wei Zilong himself. The crowd falls into stunned silence, completely unable to believe that a single person can defeat someone so famous and respected so easily. Some people even begin asking if there is truly no one left who can challenge Ken anymore. As they look around at the fallen fighters, it becomes clear that even if medical help arrives immediately, none of them will be able to walk properly for a long time. Slowly, one by one, the spectators accept that this moment marks the true collapse of Paradise. At the same time, the president of Paradise stands frozen, her heart completely broken by what has happened. She cannot understand why everything has fallen apart so suddenly, and overwhelmed by fear and frustration, she blames Ken, believing that none of this disaster would have occurred if he had never appeared. While she is lost in her emotions, Ken calmly observes his surroundings and notices that the fall of Paradise is not causing the loud reaction he has expected. He quickly understands that other factions are likely already preparing to move in and take advantage of Paradise's downfall, quietly cleaning up what remains. He also senses that rival groups are probably discussing countermeasures against the students' committee at that very moment. Beyond that, Ken can feel the tension among the regular students, who are clearly uneasy about the sudden shift in power, which explains why no one is celebrating yet. Taking all of this into account, Iori steps forward and respectfully asks Ken if they can speak privately. After a long and serious conversation away from the crowd, Ken asks Iori if this outcome truly reflects what he wants. Iori admits honestly that his biggest concern is placing too much responsibility on Ken's shoulders. Hearing this, Ken decides it is time to handle the situation carefully and correctly. He walks back to the president of Paradise and asks her to explain her true position by comparing herself to animals, trying to understand what role she actually plays. In response, she explains in a symbolic way that she does not truly hold real power of her own, and that her authority has been borrowed from someone higher up. She admits that she has only reached her position because of connections, not because of strength or leadership. As Ken listens closely, he can tell that she is not lying. Because of this, he announces to everyone that he is withdrawing his earlier condition that Paradise must be completely disbanded. He then turns to the surrounding crowd, especially those who seem eager to take advantage of the situation, and issues a clear warning. Ken tells them not to harm, pressure, or exploit the remaining members of Paradise in any way. He makes it clear that anyone who tries to use this moment to oppress others or seize power will face him directly. He also warns them not to underestimate the students' committee, and firmly orders them to leave both students and ordinary civilians alone. Ken ends by declaring that anyone who ignores his warning will be forced to face him personally in a duel, leaving no doubt that he will act if necessary. His words carry a heavy weight, and the atmosphere becomes tense and quiet as people begin to understand that while Paradise has fallen, Ken has no intention of allowing chaos or abuse to follow in its wake. As soon as everything settles, the people around finally feel safe and begin to celebrate openly because they understand that they no longer have to live in fear of powerful groups bullying them, since they have witnessed a man who is willing to stand up and protect the rights of those who have been treated unfairly. Even the journalist observing the scene realizes that this is a positive turning point, because student committees that govern themselves now feel more confident and supported, and those who have suffered under oppression finally have a way to escape it. Iori feels deep relief and gratitude, knowing that Ken has listened to his words calmly and with reason, and he feels even more thankful that Ken stands on their side instead of becoming an enemy, because he cannot even imagine the disaster that would have followed if someone like Ken had chosen the opposite path. Ken then turns his attention back to the president of Paradise, who shows clear gratitude and thanks him for sparing her, but Ken makes it clear that the matter is not finished yet. In a firm and commanding manner, he orders her to kneel down and apologize properly, explaining that once she does so, their interaction will be over. He makes it known that if she refuses to listen, he will not hesitate to fight her as well. Faced with his overwhelming presence, the president quickly complies, kneeling down and offering an apology for her past behavior, acting obedient and fearful. Ken accepts this and states that her life has only been spared because of Iori's intervention. After dealing with Paradise, Ken begins to think about who might act next, suspecting that Hwarang is likely watching everything closely, trying to measure his true strength, but he justifies his actions by believing that making such a strong move is necessary to draw hidden enemies into the open. At that moment, a representative from Pure Stream, Ishida Nanami, steps forward and boldly challenges Ken to a one-on-one duel, immediately setting the conditions by stating that if Ken wins, she and her entire committee will follow his commands without resistance, and she makes it clear that she wants nothing in return. When Ken questions her reason, Ishida explains that her only goal is to demonstrate the strength of her group. Without hesitation, she draws her sword and rushes toward Ken, slashing at him with full force. Yet Ken does not move at all and simply takes the attack head-on. Ken recognizes where Ishida comes from and knows that her region has suffered greatly from chaos and disaster, which makes him respect the fact that someone so talented has emerged from such circumstances. Ishida quickly realizes that continuing the fight is meaningless, as striking Ken feels no different from hitting solid ground, so she sheaths her sword and steps back, ending the duel. Ken then declares that he wishes to rest, believing there are no more challengers left, but suddenly, 2 Stage 2 Awakeners appear on the battlefield. Ken calmly asks if they belong to the 7-Star Society, and the 2 men reply that they are members of Hwarang and have come to challenge him to a duel. Ken responds coldly, telling them that it's finished. At first, the Awakeners didn't hear what Ken said, so Ken repeats himself and tells the 2 that they are both now finished as his eyes glow brightly. In the late 1990s, as the 20th century is coming to an end, something strange begins to happen across the world because many humans start awakening special powers. These people are later called ability users, and they are different from normal humans because they can go beyond natural limits by drawing out hidden strength from inside their bodies. They are able to break through invisible limits known as walls, which greatly improve their senses and physical strength. In the first stage of this awakening, their abilities become about 4 times stronger than an ordinary person, allowing them to move faster, hit harder, and react quicker. When they reach the second stage, their power increases even more, becoming about 16 times stronger than a normal human. However, this increase in strength does not mean they are unstoppable monsters, because raw power alone is never enough. These users still have to think carefully during battles, make smart decisions, and use strategy, since their abilities are useless if they lack even basic intelligence. Along with this power comes a serious downside, because the bodies of ability users begin to break down much faster than those of regular people. Over time, their health declines, and they become victims of a strange and dangerous condition that slowly destroys them from the inside. Then, mysterious pioneers appear and claim they have developed a drug that can stop this deterioration. Not only do they say the drug can cure the condition, but they also promise that it can awaken abilities in ordinary humans as well. From that moment, a fierce race begins across the world as nations, groups, and organizations compete to create the strongest possible human being. Governments pour resources into research, hoping to control these powers and gain dominance. Among all ability users, those who reach the second stage are the hardest to produce, even with full national support. Still, after many failed attempts, second-stage users are finally created, and whoever controls them believes they hold absolute power. These users are treated like perfect weapons, expected to complete missions without failure, and deliver results with complete certainty. That belief becomes widely accepted, and second-stage users are viewed as invincible tools of success. However, in the present time, Ken shatters all of these assumptions. He is standing in battle, easily overpowering one of these second-stage users, and proving that everything people believe about them can be wrong. As Ken continues to beat the man down, he demands to know who sent him. The injured fighter repeats the same answer again and again, saying that they are from Hanro. He then tells Ken to kill him already, because he has no intention of giving up any more information. Ken calmly refuses to do that, slamming the man into the ground and explaining that he still needs answers. While this is happening, another man nearby waits for the perfect chance to attack Ken from behind. He hesitates, running through different thoughts in his head, trying to decide whether now is the right moment to strike. But before he can act, Ken makes it clear that he has already noticed him. Ken warns him to stop immediately and abandon the idea of attacking, because it will only end badly for him. Ken adds that he is already tired of being constantly interrupted by people he compares to annoying insects. The warning carries weight, making it obvious that Ken is fully aware of everything happening around him and that trying to surprise him is pointless. Even as history paints second-stage users as unstoppable forces, Ken stands there proving through calm strength and control that true power is not just about stages or numbers, but about awareness, resolve, and the ability to dominate a situation completely. As Ken says this, he slowly turns his body and looks straight at the man with a sharp and dangerous focus. The moment their eyes meet, the man feels a deep fear rush through his body. He can no longer stay calm after seeing the killing intent in Ken's eyes, and his legs begin to move backward without thinking. He realizes that he has never faced anyone this terrifying before. Even the high-ranking executives of the Seven-Star Society, whom he has encountered in the past, do not come close to Ken's level. Fear completely takes over his thoughts, and his only instinct is to survive. In his panic, he quickly confesses that the two second-stage users are not actually from Hanro. One of those users becomes furious at him for revealing the truth and shouts at him in anger, but Ken calmly tells the man that he has made the correct choice. Ken then turns his attention to the exposed user and points out that a reporter nearby is filming everything that is happening. He reminds him that causing a bigger scene in such a public place will only make things worse. Ken then calmly asks what the man plans to do next. Realizing they have no good options left, both second-stage users struggle to their feet and begin running away as fast as they can. Ken does not chase them. Instead, he watches them leave and decides that letting them escape is the better outcome for now. He then walks over to the man who gives him the information, places a hand on his shoulder, and tells him again that he has made the right decision. Ken also warns him that if he had chosen differently, the result would have been far more painful. With his fear still lingering, the man asks Ken who he really is. Ken responds with a relaxed smirk and says that he is simply a returning student who enjoys bullying freshmen at the university. Meanwhile, the two fleeing users continue running until their lungs burn and their legs feel weak. When they finally stop to catch their breath, one of them says that Ken is nothing less than a monster, fighting as if it is the final moment of his life. The other user suggests that they should go and meet the person they are originally supposed to meet. However, the second man admits that he has no idea who that person even is and asks for an explanation. Before either of them can react, Ken suddenly appears behind them and grabs both of them at the same time. Neither of the two realizes it is Ken yet, and one of them arrogantly warns the person behind them to back off if he cares about his family. Ken listens quietly and feels disappointed by how one of them keeps talking, while the other remains silent. He presses their heads together and casually wonders what will happen if he combines both of their mouths into one. Without hesitation, he pulls out several teeth from one man's mouth. Blood spills as the man screams in pain. Ken then turns to the other man, now trembling and covered in blood, and calmly asks if he has any better ideas to share. Back at the original scene of the battle, the crowd remains confused and restless, unsure of what will happen next. Some people begin wondering where the student council representative has gone, while others answer that she is chased after the escaping men. Shortly after, a girl named Urokuran approaches the journalist and asks where Ken has gone. The journalist replies that Ken has left the area, and then asks Urokuran what she needs. Urokuran explains that she has only come to invite Ken for tea after witnessing his surprisingly human behavior. The journalist laughs lightly and says that Ken might not be interested in tea. Urokuran smiles calmly and tells her not to worry, explaining that she knows Ken very well and understands him better than most people. After everything that happens recently, the mood inside the university changes completely and feels very different from before. At the same time, the power and influence of the student council increase greatly because of these events. Paradise, on the other hand, is now almost completely broken. In truth, its collapse already begins the moment Ken challenges them openly to a duel. Since many of Paradise's members choose to leave, the group slowly turns into something that only exists in name and no longer holds real strength or authority. Hanrang is also affected, as it is now placed directly under the watch and control of the student council. As for Pure Stream, although many of its members decide to stay together, the organization itself changes and officially begins working under the student council, instead of acting on its own. Miyahara, the journalist who records the entire incident earlier using her phone, receives several rewards for her efforts. One of the biggest rewards is her promotion to the position of star reporter. Because of this, Miyahara begins receiving praise from many directions, and wherever she goes, people recognize her and speak highly of her work and achievements. Away from all this attention, Ken sits alone outside, quietly thinking about the situation. He understands that the Seven-Star Society has already started making moves behind the scenes. Ken realizes that if he wants to act freely on his own in the future, he first needs to make sure that the university itself remains stable and under control. With this goal in mind, Ken decides that training Nanami is the right step to take. At that moment, Ken oversees one of Nanami's many recent training sessions and watches her very carefully. During the session, Nanami clearly shows her true talent with the sword. She defeats one opponent after another with almost no effort, cutting them down smoothly and without hesitation. As the training continues, it becomes clear that she is not even using her full strength yet. Before long, Nanami finishes defeating all of her opponents by herself. When she moves to finish things by drawing her sword in a careless and reckless way, Ken immediately stops her and reminds her not to pull out her blade so thoughtlessly. Nanami quickly apologizes for her mistake and lowers her sword. In Ken's mind, Nanami stands out as the key person who can help maintain order within the university. He believes she has the strength and discipline needed to drive away careless and half-hearted people who might try to damage the university's name or reputation. As Ken thinks about this, he also notices just how many opponents Nanami defeats on her own during training. Because of this, he tells her that she is likely among the top 5 best swordsmen from her homeland. Hearing this, Nanami smiles slightly and confirms that it is true, adding that there was a time when she was quite arrogant because of her skill. She then goes on to explain that when a great calamity strikes her homeland, she hears stories about a key who will one day protect the townspeople. For a long time, Nanami believes that she herself is that key person destined to protect everyone. As Ken listens to her speak, he realizes that he does not fully understand what she means by the word key. Confused by this idea, he asks her to explain it more clearly. Before Nanami can answer, their conversation is suddenly interrupted when Urokuran arrives and announces that she has finally managed to find Ken. She then politely invites Ken to sit down and talk with her while drinking tea together. Even though Ken clearly does not want to spend time talking with her, he finds himself unable to refuse and goes along anyway. As Urokuran carefully pours and serves the tea, she calmly says that it has been very hard for her to finally meet him properly. She explains that every time she tries to speak with him before, he always disappears or avoids her. Ken replies in a tired manner that he is already exhausted from dealing with hidden intentions and complicated politics, and he asks her to clearly explain why she has called him here instead of wasting time. Urokuran gently answers that she truly only wants to talk with him, nothing more. She goes on to say that Ken is the person who saves the university, and that whenever she looks at him, many strange and gentle images appear in her mind without reason. She describes these thoughts as flowers opening during spring, the loud cicadas announcing summer, trees slowly changing colors beneath an autumn sky, and the first snowfall quietly covering the ground in winter. She says that all of these scenes give her a strong sense of warmth and belonging, even though she understands that these seasons will eventually pass and return again. To her, it feels as if her fate and Ken's fate are tightly connected, so deeply linked that she simply wants to stay close to him. Hearing this, Ken becomes frustrated and tells her to stop speaking in confusing and meaningless ways. Still, even as he complains, he cannot deny that he also feels something familiar around her. Even the taste of the tea feels strangely known to him, reminding him of something from his hometown. However, the feeling is not comforting or welcoming, but instead feels distant, like something familiar, yet belonging to a stranger. Urokuran then asks Ken what he thinks about the tea. Ken replies that he might say he does not like it. Urokuran quickly responds that such a thing is not possible, which makes Ken comment that she seems to know him very well. She answers calmly that she might know him just as well as his own parents do. After saying this, Urokuran suddenly stands up and invites Ken to visit her green cafe again in the future, explaining that it is the perfect place for quiet and honest conversations. It is only at that moment that Ken finally looks around carefully and realizes that the place they are in does not feel normal at all. The atmosphere feels unusual, and the surroundings seem far different from an ordinary space. From this, Ken becomes certain that Urokuran is definitely not a normal human being. In another location far away, Ryuji Otsuka receives news that both Hanrang and Paradise have been completely taken down. Curious and concerned, he asks his informant which faction is responsible for such a major event. The informant answers that it is all done by just one man. Ryuji immediately wonders if America might be involved behind the scenes, but further investigation shows that even they are confused and unaware of what has happened. After carefully thinking through all the information and possibilities, Ryuji finally comes to the conclusion that this incident must involve an awakener. Realizing the seriousness of such a person appearing, he decides that meeting this man is necessary very soon. After hearing that there is an awakened person involved, Ryuji's mood and behavior change completely, and his calm attitude disappears almost instantly. He quickly leaves his office and orders his men to prepare a car right away, showing that he intends to act without delay. Standing outside the office is Atsushi Ayanoji, an executive officer of the Seven Star Society, who tries to stop him by saying that he should not make careless decisions. Atsushi reminds Ryuji that he holds the position of deputy director and that it would be improper for someone of his rank to personally involve himself with a simple university student. Ryuji replies firmly that the situation is extremely serious and that it requires someone with authority and experience like himself to handle it. Atsushi strongly disagrees and argues that it would be better to send disposable soldiers to deal with unstable and uncontrollable freaks rather than getting important people involved. As he says this, Atsushi realizes that Ryuji is still deeply affected by the fact that he himself never becomes an awakener, and this thought shapes his harsh words. Hearing this, Ryuji loses his temper completely, grabs Atsushi by the throat, and lifts him off the ground with ease. He angrily explains that Atsushi is treating the situation far too lightly, and warns him that such thinking is extremely dangerous. Ryuji then explains that awakeners are not just strategic weapons to be used on a battlefield, but beings who can act as entire armies by themselves if needed. He also makes it clear that awakeners are capable of communication and understanding, which means it is wiser to speak with them and negotiate rather than immediately treating them as enemies. Atsushi argues back that some awakened individuals might refuse to communicate at all and are closer to monsters than humans. Ryuji acknowledges that awakeners can indeed appear monstrous, but he believes that somewhere deep inside them, a sense of humanity still remains. Because of that belief, he decides to follow his own plan rather than Atsushi's suggestion. Ryuji then reaches out and contacts Ken directly, arranging a meeting with him as soon as possible. Meanwhile, at the Green Cafe, Ken asks Urokuran if it is all right for him to use her place for a short while. Urokuran agrees immediately and tells him that she will step outside to give him privacy. Ken then explains that the National Security Committee is extremely persistent about meeting him, and although he does not like it, he decides to accept the meeting. Still, he admits that he feels the future ahead looks dark and uncertain. Urokuran responds by gently suggesting that he accept this situation as fate, believing that it might eventually lead to something meaningful. Not long after, Ryuji arrives at the cafe, and the two of them go inside to begin their discussion. Without wasting any time, Ken directly asks Ryuji why he comes to see him. Ryuji answers honestly that he is not there to force any difficult contracts or obligations on Ken, but instead wants to build a cooperative relationship that can be relied on during emergencies. Hearing this, Ken immediately understands that they are simply trying to use him as a tool, like a loyal animal that can be called upon whenever the country needs help. This realization angers him, and he begins recounting a painful memory from his past. Ken explains how he is once captured by Americans and treated no better than a trained dog. During that time, he is subjected to cruel experiments and pushed far beyond human limits, enduring suffering that no normal person should ever have to face. These memories make it clear to Ken why he cannot easily trust organizations that claim to want cooperation. When Ken finally returns to his homeland after everything he goes through, he discovers that every person he once cares about is already dead, leaving him completely alone in a place that should feel familiar. During this painful period, no one from his own country reaches out to help him or offers even the smallest amount of support, and instead of comfort, he is met only with silence and neglect. Rather than treating him like a human being who suffers deeply, the Seven-Star Society uses him like a tool, pulling his strings and treating him as if he has no will of his own. From Ken's point of view, his country never protects him or stands by his side, and instead only causes him endless suffering, turning his life into something unbearable. Because of this, Ken cannot understand why anyone expects him to feel loyalty or a sense of duty toward a nation that abandons him when he needs it the most. Ken is also fully aware that Ryuji comes to see him not just to talk, but to place him under watch and control through a so-called agreement. Ryuji then tries to convince Ken by saying that they both share the same enemies, suggesting that this common threat might be the reason Ken needs in order to work with them. He also explains that the organization wants to understand how far Ken is willing to go and what limits, if any, he has. Ken responds honestly and without hesitation, saying that he is prepared to break any law if it means reaching his goals and completing what he believes needs to be done. Hearing this, Ryuji calmly replies that he will take responsibility for covering up any illegal actions Ken commits, as long as they work together. Seeing that Ryuji is surprisingly willing to agree to nearly everything, Ken decides to ask the most important question that is on his mind. He wants to know what will happen if he himself ever becomes a threat to the country. Ryuji answers directly, saying that they will attempt to eliminate him if that situation ever arises. At those words, Ken's eyes slowly turn yellow as he questions whether Ryuji truly believes such a thing is possible. The killing intent that flows from Ken at that moment is so intense that Ryuji feels frozen in place, unable to move or speak properly. For a brief moment, he feels completely restrained by fear. After forcing himself to regain control, Ryuji states firmly that there is a difference between what can be done and what absolutely must be done, speaking with the authority of someone used to making difficult decisions. In the end, Ken agrees to cooperate with the KNSC, not out of loyalty, but because he respects Ryuji's attitude and the way he carries himself. They seal the agreement with a handshake, after which Ryuji tells Ken to contact him if he ever needs anything. Without wasting time, Ken immediately requests that they locate Yanagimoto Mei and Kunyama Kyoko for him. Later on, Ken receives a phone call from Miyahara, who expresses her gratitude toward him for being the reason behind her promotion, and says she hopes to meet him soon. Ken agrees easily and tells her to come see him right away since he is currently free. Elsewhere, far from Ken's awareness, a secret group actively plans his assassination. One of the executives argues confidently with a man known as K, claiming that this time they have a real chance to succeed. K replies that the previous attempt fails badly, but the executive explains that it is only a test using second-stage awakeners and that a more serious plan is now underway. As these plans unfold, several snipers prepare their weapons, ready to kill Ken the moment they receive the signal. They believe that it is easiest to strike when someone is relaxed and enjoying their life, and they take grim pleasure in their work, fully convinced that this is their perfect opportunity. The sky is dark and heavy, matching the tense mood when Miyahara finally notices Ken standing far away in the distance. She lifts her hand and waves at him, then hurries over in his direction. As soon as she reaches him, she quickly apologizes for making him wait and explains that she does not mean to arrive late. At the same time, far from their view, the snipers are still hiding in their positions, watching carefully and preparing to kill Ken at any moment. One of the assassins feels surprised when he notices that there are still people walking around in this area, since he expects the place to be empty. The other sniper calmly explains that the girl is a journalist who has been following Ken around to publish exciting stories about him. He adds that if the media ends up supporting Ken, it could become a serious problem for them, so he tells his partner that the girl should be eliminated as well. The sniper slowly aims his rifle, feeling a small sense of regret for Miyahara because she has been dragged into this situation, but he convinces himself that it is her own fault for being there. Without any more hesitation, he pulls the trigger. The bullet flies through the air, heading straight toward Miyahara, but at the very last second, Ken notices something dangerous coming toward them. In a sudden movement, he raises his hand and stops the bullet before it can reach her. It soon becomes clear that Ken has not only blocked the shot, but has actually caught the bullet in midair with his bare hand. He calmly drops the bullet onto the ground and examines it closely, realizing that it is not a normal bullet but a special type of ammunition designed specifically to be used against people with abilities. Understanding what this means, Ken immediately prepares himself for what is coming next. Miyahara, confused and worried, asks Ken if something has just flown past him, clearly shaken by what has happened. Ken does not answer her question directly, but tells her to stay where she is and assures her that he will return shortly. Without wasting another moment, he rushes toward the direction from which the bullet is fired. As he moves quickly through the area, Ken spots a white cap sticking out from behind the trees and realizes that this is likely connected to the assassin. While heading toward it, Ken thinks to himself that his enemies need to stop sending weak and careless people after him, believing that such cheap methods might work on ordinary or weak targets, but will never succeed against someone like him. When he finally reaches the spot where the white cap is hanging, Ken begins attacking fiercely, throwing brutal punches without holding back, but he soon realizes that something is wrong. The cap is only hanging from a tree branch and is nothing more than a decoy, while the real assassin is hiding behind Ken the entire time. The assassin steps out from the shadows and mocks Ken, saying that he is always too quick to rush forward without thinking, comparing Ken's behavior to someone trying to pet a cat and warning that if you are not careful, the cat might run away or even bite back. Ken ignores the man's teasing words completely and calmly adjusts his position to face him instead, asking with a cold smile whether it is really smart to reveal oneself before being absolutely sure of victory. Right after saying this, Ken suddenly charges forward and delivers a powerful punch straight into the assassin's stomach, explaining that he has no choice but to hit him like this, because if he does not act immediately, the assassin will simply escape once again. Once the man is fully pinned to the ground and can no longer move freely, he immediately tries to talk his way out of the situation and begins negotiating with Ken, calmly explaining that his life is now completely in Ken's hands, and that whether he lives or dies depends on Ken's decision, suggesting that they make a deal because Ken might be interested if it benefits him in some way. Ken responds without much emotion and tells him to speak quickly and not waste time. Hearing this, the assassin asks whether Ken truly believes that he has come to this place alone, which confuses Ken for a brief moment until the assassin explains that it would be extremely foolish to attempt to take down an awakened individual by himself. While this conversation is happening, the second assassin is slowly and quietly moving toward Miyahara, who is still standing where Ken tells her to wait. Suddenly, without any warning, the assassin jumps out and pushes Miyahara down to the ground, assuming that she must be someone special since she is meeting with Ken, an awakened individual, but quickly realizing that she is nothing more than a normal human with no special powers at all. The assassin coldly tells Miyahara that she is responsible for what is about to happen to her and adds that she should blame herself for being too greedy and getting involved in matters beyond her reach. Miyahara does not understand what he means at first, so the assassin explains that she has been chasing Ken only to gain stories and attention as a reporter, laughing darkly and saying that hurting her will be the perfect form of revenge. As he speaks, Miyahara stays quiet on the outside, but inside her mind she desperately searches for a way to escape, knowing she needs to delay the assassin and buy enough time for Ken to return. Gathering her courage, she tells the assassin that he is letting his personal emotions control his actions, and mentions that once the Seven-Star Society finds out about this incident, there will be serious consequences. Hearing this, the assassin freezes for a moment, shocked that a simple reporter knows about such secret matters, his eyes widening as he wonders how she could possibly have that information, but he quickly regains his composure and realizes that Miyahara is only trying to stall him. He angrily shouts at her to stop talking nonsense and stop trying to trick him, then pulls out his knife without hesitation and moves to attack her. At that exact moment, a strange and heavy pressure wraps around his body, stopping him in place, and the assassin immediately wonders if this is Ken's ability at work. As he struggles, he feels a terrifying killing intent and sees it reflected in Ken's eyes. Even so, the assassin has come prepared for such a situation and activates a powerful aura blast that sends Miyahara flying through the air, but before she can hit the ground, Ken appears and catches her safely, placing her gently aside and telling her that she does well and handles the situation bravely. The assassin does not hesitate and rushes straight at Ken, hoping to strike before Ken can react. But as expected, Ken easily overpowers him, swiftly knocking the knife out of his hand and completely breaking his stance. With the fight clearly over, Ken calmly tells the assassin that he will let him go this time, and adds that the man should return home and sleep beside his mother, making it clear that this is his only warning. After Ken finished dealing with the assassin, he finally let out a deep breath, feeling a short moment of relief after the tension. Soon after that, the female assassin carefully walked into the area and realized that she had been lucky, as making a deal with Ken had saved her life. At the same time, the male assassin felt intense anger when he understood that his partner had chosen to make an agreement with Ken instead of standing by him. Even though he was furious, he clearly knew that he was badly injured and no longer in a condition to fight anyone, so he decided that the smartest choice was to retreat and leave the area immediately. Meanwhile, the female assassin carefully observed Ken and could clearly tell that his strength had grown tremendously. She openly told him that he had become far more powerful after awakening his abilities, speaking with a tone that carried both respect and caution. Nearby, Miyahara noticed that Ken was injured and immediately stepped forward, wanting to help treat his wounds. However, Ken stopped her and firmly told her to stay away from him, not wanting her to get any closer. He then turned his attention back to the female assassin and warned her seriously not to break the agreement they had made earlier. As Ken prepared to threaten her further, the female assassin quickly reassured him that she always honored her contracts and never went back on her word. She calmly explained that she had already completed the task she was assigned and promised that she would never accept any mission related to Ken in the future. After saying this, the female assassin turned toward Miyahara and apologized for shooting at her earlier, telling her to contact her if she ever needed help with anything as a way to make up for what she had done. Once the assassins finally left the scene and disappeared from sight, Ken looked at Miyahara with a worried and serious expression. In a quiet but firm voice, he told her that it would be best for her to stay away from him from now on, making it clear that being near him would only put her in more danger. Hearing Ken's words, Miyahara feels completely crushed inside, as if her heart has broken into pieces. She starts thinking that Ken must believe she has only been staying close to him to collect stories and advance her career as a reporter. With shaking emotions, Miyahara explains that this is not true at all, and says that the real reason she stayed near him was because she was deeply moved by his courage. She tells him that seeing Ken fight to protect ordinary people inspired her and gave her hope, and that was why she wanted to be near him. Miyahara keeps trying to explain herself, but Ken gently stops her before she can say more. He tells her that he already understands that she is not using him for news or fame. Ken then explains that he is strong enough to survive on his own, no matter how dangerous the situation becomes, and that he can handle any threat that comes his way. Miyahara argues back, saying that she is not weak either, and that she does not want to be treated like someone fragile. However, Ken no longer wants to continue the discussion. He feels emotionally exhausted and, with a heavy heart, asks her once again to keep her distance from him for her own safety. This time, Miyahara does not argue. Instead, she quietly asks if they will still be able to talk to each other on the phone. Ken gives a small nod to confirm this, and Miyahara turns around and walks away without saying anything more. Just moments later, Ken receives a phone call from Ryuji, who informs him that Kyoko has just been released from the hospital where she had been staying. Ken immediately understands that something is wrong and tells Ryuji to send backup to her location as fast as possible. Elsewhere, Kuniyama Aki is desperately trying to call Ken again and again. She hopes with all her heart that he will answer, because she seems to be trapped somewhere and cannot escape. Ken, however, does not pick up his phone. Aki grows more frightened by the second, especially because she knows her mother's life is also in danger. Her fear slowly turns into anger as she realizes Ken is not responding. Just then, the door to the room suddenly opens, and one of the kidnappers barges inside, locking eyes with Aki. Mizukami becomes very angry with Aki because she not only tried to contact Ken, but also gave him information about their situation. Because of this, he roughly pulls her out of the room and takes her aside. There, Mizukami tells Aki that he has spent his entire life building this organization from nothing. He explains that when Yanagimoto destroyed the underworld, he was forced to abandon his emotions and completely harden his heart in order to survive. He believes that his judgment is strong and that he is a man who acts with deep conviction. Hearing this, Aki mocks him and says that if he is planning to kill her, then his instincts are not as sharp as he believes they are. This comment greatly annoys Mizukami. He notices that Aki is still talking back and decides that she needs to be punished to learn her place. Without hesitation, he takes out his phone and calls the men who are holding Aki's mother hostage. In a cold voice, Mizukami orders them to cut off one of her mother's hands and make sure to stop the bleeding right after. When he ends the call, Aki is left completely shaken and terrified. She desperately reminds Mizukami that keeping her mother alive was part of their agreement. Mizukami calmly replies that he did instruct his men to stop the bleeding, so technically, her mother would still live. However, he tells Aki that she still has a chance to make things better. He demands that she say out loud that she is a worthless piece of trash. With no other option left and fearing for her mother's life, Aki forces herself to say exactly what he wants. After hearing her obey, Mizukami decides to show a small amount of mercy. He takes out his phone again and calls his men a second time. This time, he tells them not to cut off Aki's mother's hand after all. Instead, he orders them to only cut off one finger, making it clear that this reduced punishment is the reward for Aki's obedience. At the same time, Ken makes a phone call to Yasha, who has been watching over things for him from the shadows. Yasha sounds surprised and comments that it is very unusual for Ken to call him directly. Ken calmly asks whether Yasha remembers the woman he spoke about earlier. Yasha immediately says that he remembers her clearly. Ken then tells him to find the woman's mother as soon as possible. In return for this help, Ken promises to give Yasha a reward that will be worth all the effort. Yasha asks Ken if he is serious about the promise, and Ken calmly asks back if he has ever broken a promise before. Hearing this, Yasha agrees without hesitation and quickly sends the location straight to Ken's phone. Ken's expression turns cold as he quietly calls out Mizukami's name, stating that this time he will make sure everything between them is settled properly. Meanwhile, at the place where Aki's mother is being held, one man sits lazily while holding a machete in his hand. The room looks more like a slaughterhouse than a hiding place, with bloodstains and a terrible smell in the air. Another woman is also being kept there, and she keeps crying and screaming in fear. Annoyed by the noise, the man tells his partner to silence her. When she does not stop, they decide to kill her and dispose of her body somewhere far away. After finishing with her, the man slowly turns his attention to Aki's mother, thinking that he has kept her waiting long enough. He walks toward her in a calm but frightening manner and tells her not to be afraid because he will finish quickly. He also orders her to stay still and not resist. Grabbing her roughly by the hair, he pulls her head back and says that she is lucky she did not end up like the others before her. As he prepares to act, the man tries to recall which body part he was instructed to cut off. Another man nearby reminds him that the order was only to remove one finger. Hearing this, he carefully places Aki's mother's finger into position and tells her once again to stay completely still. He warns her that if she moves even a little, the injury will become much worse. Atsushi was sitting down and eating his meal while calmly talking with one of his subordinates. During the conversation, he asked the man if it was true that Uetsu had said he would personally take care of Ken. The subordinate confirmed that this information was correct. Atsushi felt that while this news could be considered positive, Uetsu was also known as a major troublemaker, so he hoped that Uetsu would not do anything reckless or unnecessary. The subordinate then asked Atsushi whether Ken was really as dangerous as people claimed. Atsushi paused and thought carefully before answering. He explained that even though the Seven-Star Society currently had a strong and stable foundation, it had once been completely destroyed by a single man. That man was Ken. Atsushi remembered how Ken had torn through the Seven-Star Society all by himself, defeating every person who stood in his way without exception. In those memories, Atsushi recalled the terrifying moment when Ken had grabbed him by the throat and lifted him up, calmly telling him that Mizukami had already been dealt with in the most brutal way possible. Ken had then asked Atsushi how he should be handled next. Atsushi remembered how Ken began counting while looking down at the ground, and how he suddenly realized they were standing on the 5th floor of the building. Ken had casually wondered how many times he would need to drop Atsushi from that height before his body finally broke. Returning to the present, Atsushi muttered that not even the devil himself could be as cruel and merciless as Ken. The memory completely killed his appetite, and he stood up from the table, no longer interested in finishing his food. He then told his subordinate that they needed to assign someone to watch Ken from a safe distance. Atsushi made it clear that getting too close to Ken would only lead to certain death, so careful observation was the only option left. Meanwhile, At the butcher factory where Aki's mother was being held, the man holding the machete was just about to strike her finger as ordered. At that exact moment, Ken arrived out of nowhere. Without hesitation, he hurled a machete straight toward the man, stopping the attack just in time and changing the course of what was about to happen. The thrown machete strikes the man's arm, making him drop his weapon in shock. When he looks up and recognizes Ken, he instantly understands that his situation is hopeless. Before he can react, the other men rush toward Ken without any plan, moving purely out of panic. Ken responds without hesitation, knocking them down one by one in a ruthless and efficient way. He moves through them quickly, striking and stabbing until they stop moving, showing no mercy at all. One of the men panics and pulls out a gun, thinking it might help. His leader shouts at him to drop it, warning that using a gun is a foolish choice, but the man ignores him. The moment he loads the bullet and aims, Ken suddenly disappears from his sight. In the next instant, Ken is right in front of him, taking the gun away and knocking him unconscious with a single blow. Ken then slowly walks toward the leader, his presence heavy and terrifying. The leader falls to his knees and begs Ken repeatedly to spare his life, but Ken shows no reaction to his pleas. Without warning, Ken punches him hard in the nose, breaking it instantly. The man screams loudly in pain and fear, calling out for help. Ken responds by kicking him with full force, saying that he is asking for too much. After dealing with him, Ken turns his attention to Aki's mother. He gently apologizes to her for arriving late, making it clear that she is safe now. Elsewhere, Mizukami tells Aki that she should feel thankful that he only ordered his men to cut off a finger instead of something worse. Just then, his phone rings with a call from the butcher factory. Mizukami answers and immediately orders them to make sure the finger is cut properly. Instead of the expected response, he hears a calm greeting. He quickly realizes that it is Ken speaking on the other end. Ken casually asks how Mizukami's life has been, pointing out that it has been a long time since they last spoke. Ken then informs him that everyone working under Mizukami has already been killed, adding that he knows Mizukami does not care about their lives. Finally, Ken warns him to prepare himself, stating that this time he will not stop at crushing him, but will tear him apart with his own hands.